Hello, everyone, and welcome to the W.K. Kellogg's Foundation's National Day of Racial Healing. As Eva Longoria creeps by, we see you, girl. Hey! I am Tanika Ray, and I am so super excited to be here to be your live stream host for this monumental event, curated by filmmaker and activist and everybody's everything, Ava DuVernay. We are live at her Array Creative Campus right here in Los Angeles. For the next few hours, activists, entertainers, and influencers will come together in the name of harmony, humanity, to address the tactics and tools around the idea of racial healing. We have live performances that are going to blow you away throughout the day, along with provocative conversations. We'll hear from political leaders like Stacey Abrams, activists like the Ladies of Time's Up, poets and authors like Robin Cost Lewis and Jacqueline Woodson, and entertainers like David Oyelowo. I love saying his last name. And of course, the girl who just walked by, new mommy, Eva Longoria, and so many more. Our first artist is an award-winning choreographer and director whose mission is to bring awareness to social issues around the world. And with this performance, he's showcasing the beauty of cross-cultural respect and collaboration. What perfect timing. Please welcome movement artist John Buggs and Company and fancy dancers from Turtle Island. Let's take it away.
I had a dream once. I was as I am now, only different. Kind of like your reflection in a hazy mirror. I had a dream once where I asked, what came before? The wind answered me softly. Before what, my friend? Before the glimmering retch of the concrete over the mud, before the jazz, the screams, and the sprinklers in the summer, before the chains, before the moans, before the rain, before I was moved by you, and before I moved, it was all so quiet then. And then a drum came from the ether, and a voice filled with eyes and wings and the will to be my teacher. A man, perhaps, now that I think of it. He said the stars were here, and so were we. He showed me, and he moved me, and he looked so different, yet told me we are the same.
are indigenous people, indigenous to this land. We are star people, stars from the first creation. We are the energy we live in our everyday walk of life. We dance in love to the drum, the heartbeat of Mother Earth.
Incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Tell me a little bit about how you put that together. Give us the log line. Let me catch your breath. Okay? A little bit about how you put this together, John.
So this piece was originally a film that was directed by myself and DJ Two Bears.
Hello, how you doing?
And we just wanted to create a film about natives and African Americans and the shared adversity we have and how both cultures have dealt with a lot of adversity and oppression in this country. So we wanted to do a piece that shines light on that, but also share that we still dance through the struggle, you know? So that's kind of like what the piece is about, and you were blessed enough to let us bring it here and do a live version of it. Whew. Sorry, I'm out of breath. But
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So hi, my name is Ava DuVernay. I want to welcome you all here. Give it up for yourselves for being here. Really, really appreciate you all being here. And everyone watching on the live stream. So I was approached by the Kellogg Foundation to think about race and the future, and just invited to sit on this council of people that they had brought together just to share ideas. And within that came from the beautiful people at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation this idea to do something a little bit larger, a little bit more demonstrative for this day, the National Racial Day of Healing that they've been doing for several years. Now I was remiss, I hadn't really heard about it, but as I got to know more about it, I became fascinated and started to think about what I would do if I had the chance. And so Kellogg gave us the chance here at Array. We're at the Array campus here in Los Angeles to bring together some folks around the idea of healing. This is a very divisive, tense time that we're in. On any given day, I read or see or hear something on social media or on the news that really threatens to break my spirit. And so the idea of how do we stay unbroken, how do we stay resistant to some of the division that continues to come towards us, this idea of healing, I think, is the start. Because I'm always a little skeptical of the kumbaya moment. I think in order to hold someone's hand, you have to respect them and understand them. And so that is what we're trying to do here today. Just a little bit. Just the tip of the iceberg. Nothing's going to get solved. But when I see pieces online like John and the Turtle Island Dancers' beautiful piece, I become inspired about what is possible when we talk to each other and look each other in the eye. So that's what this is for. So I encourage you at home to tweet along, talk about what you're seeing. Trolls, you can tweet too. It's okay. Reveal yourselves. It's all good because we're strong in our courage to look each other in the eye and try to figure some of these things out. Nothing is going to get solved in a day, but the idea that we have to have these continual conversations is something that I'm really interested in as a black woman who wants to stay black till I die and strong all the way. So we have to be talking to each other as we go. So a couple of things. There's folks at home. There's a beautiful studio audience here that we've invited to our campus, and I'm proud that you're going to be able to see a bit of our campus as the day proceeds on the live stream. This is something that was built with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Is Woody here? Woody. Okay, the former owner of these three buildings had a vision for putting something together that would be a production campus for commercials and those kinds of things. And at the point that he was willing to sell this place, I had no money to buy the place. But my colleague, Telaine Jones, who's my partner in crime in all of our companies, Array Releasing, Forward Movement, Array Alliance, said, just take a risk and try it. So I just mortgaged myself to the hilt. I just went beyond what I could do. And by doing that, beautiful blessings came from it, like this day. And so this campus lives and breathes. We haven't even been in it for a year, but we're starting to make it our own, and I'm really proud of it and happy to share it with everyone at home. So as you go through the day, please be hashtagging, be tweeting, be sharing it on your Instagram stories. WK Kellogg Foundation is one of the handles that you should be hitting. And just to talk to you about some of the people that are in the audience, we have activists like Alicia Garza, we have, and Dr. Melina Mohammed, we have, who else do I see? We've got Time's Up architects like Nina Shaw and Maha Dakil and Katie McGrath, who is a badass. We've got all kinds of executives from CBS and Lionsgate and Warner Brothers and Netflix and OWN. I'm not just shouting out the companies I have TV shows with. There are other people here also. We have authors and poets and activists and dancers. We have Verde Visconti here from Prada. We have a lot of beautiful people here who want to come together just to understand a little bit more about each other. So we got Disney in the house. We've got Hulu in the house. We've got all kinds of people in the house. We've got my sweet Meg Murray from Wrinkle in Time, Storm Reed. We've got the man who played Dr. King, David Oyelowo. It's a whole bunch of people over in here. So we'll get started, and let me introduce the woman that's made this possible. I like to call her Mama Warbucks. She doesn't like that. But she really opened up the purse strings of Kellogg Foundation to not only have this day happen, but all of the events that are happening around the country in different states. She is Miss LeJune Montgomery Tabron from Kellogg Foundation. Come on out, ma'am. And she's beautiful, too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava, for such a warm introduction. This day is just going to be amazing. I am so honored, and thank you, Ava, for curating the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's 2019 National Day of Racial Healing. You can clap. I am just delighted to partner with Ava because together we are going to generate time for us to have conversations together about racial healing. At the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, our work is focused on children, their families, and their communities. And the National Day of Racial Healing is a time to bring communities together and people together so that they can talk about racial healing and create opportunities for children and families to thrive. We are just honored to understand how healing can connect to equity moving forward. And this is what this day is all about. Today, we will have conversations. We will consider what it will take to expand equity in our society. Our goal today is to listen well, to listen with respect, and to listen to others. And let's understand what others think and feel, and leave here knowing that perspectives are larger than our own. We want you to know that at the end of the day, empathy is what we all will learn, and with empathy, together, we can create a society where all children thrive. Dr. Martin Luther King understood this. And in fact, we intentionally established the National Day of Racial Healing to follow the day that we celebrate his birthday, because he gave us wisdom and a path forward. And unfortunately, our work is yet to be completed. And so we say we start today. We start right here. And we use our skills, our gifts, our talents, and most importantly, our voices. So let's begin today. Please join us. Join us today, and together we will keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.
Yes, let's give one more round of applause to LeJune Montgomery Tabron. Thank you so much. And she's so right. We are not going to get anywhere through silence. We've got to have these tough conversations. In honor of using our voices, as LeJune mentioned, we are presenting conversations to stimulate dialogue and talk about the hard topics and situations we all face every single day in this country. But today's forum definitely won't be your typical Q&A panel. Joining us for our first conversation on race and representation, we have some amazing people coming up to the stage. What I want to say is, who's had these conversations before, sat down at the Thanksgiving dinner table and really talked through with love and compassion? I think we don't do that enough. Our holidays just went by and a lot of people were like, if your family members are going to talk about that, just say you don't want to. We don't talk about race and inequality and women's issues, but this is a time that we have, and it's vital that we do. As long as we come from a place of understanding, then we are going to get someplace. But silence only helps supremacy and the elite, and we're not going to get anywhere without that. So I'm really excited for this first conversation on race and representation. Please welcome Dominic Patton of Deadline Hollywood. Let's do this.
It's a real honor to be here for what's an incredibly important day. And I first of all want to say thank you to Ava and thank you to the Kellogg Foundation. They deserve a huge round of applause for putting this together and bringing all of us together. You know, on a day when we're going to talk about healing, I want to talk about one of the things that the Kellogg Foundation does and a lot of other people do. And I should probably talk into the mic, which doesn't seem to be on right now. There it is. You know, one of the things the Kellogg Foundation does is it talks about children. And there's someone here. Where's Storm? You're amazing, all right? You're amazing. And there are children all over the world who've seen the work you've done, and they've seen representation of race and gender and just talent. And thank you so much, Storm, for being here. Now, as I said, we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to do a little different kind of panel, so I'm just going to kick this off right away. So please welcome, if you will, director, producer, actress, and philanthropist, Eva Longoria. So much. Actor and producer David Aiello. Yes. Don't stay there long. We got a surprise for you. Director Angela Robinson.
Yeah.
Hello. And writer, director, and producer Judd Apatow. Now, one of the things we're doing on this National Day of Racial Healing, we're going to pull back layers. And we've talked about that, and new layers of understanding. And those discussions are going to happen today in the 3 panels we're having. And I hope they happen at home on the live stream. And I hope they happen with all of us afterwards. But as we do this panel, we're going to do what we're calling the hot seat. Now, here's how it's going to work. And it does resemble a bad game show, I will admit, right now. When one of these guests get called to the hot seat, which is this one, the 3 others are going to shoot rapid-fire questions dealing with issues of race and representation. After that person in the hot seat answers all the questions, we will rotate, like a game show, and a new person will join the hot seat. Now, none of this is rehearsed. We do have some questions, and the first person in the hot seat is you, my friend David. And the first person asking a question, and we distinctly are going to turn up the volume and temperature on this, because that's how you have real discussions, is by actually asking real questions. Angie?
All right, okay, we're just going to start it off. Okay. Oh, hello, everybody. David.
Yes.
In light of the recent revelations about R. Kelly,
That was my question.
what can black men do better to support black women?
Wow, okay. Nice and light. Well, I think, to be honest, first of all, to just support black women, period. That being something that we do is paramount, I think. But I think when it comes to the individual you're mentioning specifically, to be able to really just acknowledge that what these women are saying is true. This does happen. and that their voice should and must be heard in relation to this. In this particular situation, it's been being said for a long time, and people just didn't pay attention. And I actually think that, you know, some of what's been going on in society, you know, Hollywood has been under a lot of pressure. The music world has somehow, you know, in terms of some of the things that go on, is getting a pass.
Well,
and I think that really has to be looked at.
David, if you don't mind, Eva, clearly you have something to say about this. Let's.
No, I agree with the music side of it. You know, hi, can you hear me? Hello. Angela? I'm going to use Angela's. I agree with you with the music aspect. You know, with Time's Up and the launch of Time's Up, we've had a lot of movement, and we were talking about mobilizing around the Grammys, because we mobilize around the Golden Globes, we mobilize around Oscars, we're like, where are the Grammys? What's happening with the music industry? Because there's been atrocities that have happened with women in the music industry. So I was just agreeing that absolutely we need to focus on all aspects of entertainment, not only across all industries, but in entertainment, we focused on Hollywood because of Weinstein, right? There's so many things going on in the music industry that we have to fix.
Well, also, can you hear me? We all, what's happening?
We're going to play musical mics today.
We all. Well, also, I think it's interesting to note that he was only dropped from his record label last week. Yeah. And so it seems that all this information has been out for a very long time. I mean, it's presented very well in the documentary, but there have been so many articles about it really specifically discussing it. And why does a major corporation like that need something like the groundswell from the documentary to make that choice?
Because his records aren't selling anymore. I mean, I think sadly to say that's a lot of what this comes about is it's about money. Some of the greatest social change we saw in the 1970s, for instance, with the gay and lesbian community, was when consumers realized they could sell to them. In the 1960s, when companies realized they could sell to the African American community, suddenly they started caring about them. I think we're seeing the reverse in these cases is until someone's not a moneymaker, they're just like, well, it's just a problem, but we've got lawyers, and that's a real problem.
I also want to add when the Woke, the Women of Color group within Time's Up, did an action last year where we spoke out, and we really wanted to speak to the survivors who were not being listened to or paid attention to. But I want to also address the systemic problems inside the music industry, because a lot of women we talked to in the music industry were like, don't help us. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's hard enough for us to get in here. It's hard enough for us to we need to work with producers. We need to work with, like, it's fine if there's porn in the thing. Do you, like, we're just doing our thing, and you guys are coming in here and with your own set of values, and you don't know what we're dealing with specifically to the music industry, and you don't know about what's happening. So I just want to acknowledge that every industry is really particular to itself, and there's a lot of built-in systemic problems particular to that industry and to our own that we, kind of went in, ignorant about. Yeah.
But Angela, how do when someone responds like that, how do you say, okay, let's try to move this conversation, let's try to move this situation forward?
I think it's really important to talk to, everybody knows their own business, basically, and each business is really specific. Like the entertainment industry is very tribal. It's like its own culture. It's like going to Japan or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't think of it, but it's that.
Excellent analogy.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying that there's all these things that you don't even think about that govern how it works, and how change can really be possible. But I just think you really need to take the time to listen and hear what the themes are and where there's possibility for movement within each particular thing, because it can't be painted with one big brush.
Well, I think that a lot of the problem is that the gatekeepers have this power to give people careers, and we saw that with Harvey Weinstein and R. Kelly, and they abuse that. And then a lot of people don't want to offend the gatekeeper because he's a powerful person who has the ability to make people a lot of money. And so those become the most dangerous people.
Oh, yes. We're moving. The next question. We're moving on.
This is not rapid fire at all.
It's very slow rapid. Well, Judd, you have a question for David?
Or do we have to switch seats?
We're going
Okay.
in a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to say it fast.
Yes.
I'm going to say it fast.
We're modern. We do it all on our phones.
Okay. How did you find the strength to work through the obstacles to create your creative career? And on a practical level, what can the business do to help remove those obstacles?
Well, one of the greatest obstacles, as a black actor working in Hollywood, one of the greatest obstacles has been historically the idea that our stories are niche. And actually, by virtue of, if it's called a black film, that instantaneously makes it narrow. And if the industry thinks of it that way, they market it that way, they think of it internationally in that way. And so one of my greatest challenges has been to position myself, educate my industry, and bring the audience into the fact that I am a human being, not just a black artist or a black storyteller, but someone who's interested in expansive stories. So to get us as a people not to be thought of as niche, I think is one of the greatest challenges.
Eva, your question for David.
Okay, I'm going to take this. I'm going to ask everybody the same question, which is, because we know the problems, we know underrepresentation in film and media, we know all of this. What are you going to commit to doing? Not what do you want to do, what do you want to commit to doing to change that? Like for me personally, I've committed to working with 50% female directors in this year, just in 2018, whether it's in TV, whether it's in film, writers, below the line, and things that I produce, I want 50% below the line. So what can you commit to help change the representation in our industry with your work?
Well, not to blow my own trumpet, but I committed to that 10 years ago.
Trumpet rightly blown.
Yeah, and it's so welcome everyone to my world.
Now that's rapid fire for you.
So it's always seemed bizarre to me that we have 50%, over 50% of our population as women, and then the marginalization that goes on along those lines. The other thing I want to commit to, and this is where, and it feeds into your question, there is a societal and moral hypocrisy that happens within both Hollywood and I think the music industry, where there are social norms that we do not acknowledge affect how women are perceived, especially, and people of color generally. And so to acknowledge the fact that images are political, words are political. If you say certain things about women continually within music, that seeps into the culture, that seeps into the psyche, and it then dictates how women are treated, which is why an R. Kelly exists for so long, because that industry depends on that negative depiction of women being the norm and being permissible. If we as a society say that is not okay to say that of a woman, to say that of a black person, to have that description be de rigueur, then I think things would change. It's the same thing for me when it comes to the objectification of women within film. You know, if I'm producing something, if that's something that I am a part of, I have to speak up in relation to that, because if I'm not part of the solution, I am part of the problem.
With that, thank you very much, David. Angela, it's your turn in the hot seat.
Oh, man.
And we are going to kick off with you actually answering the very same question from Eva.
Oh, yes. For me, Eva. That's Eva.
Eva.
I'm Eva.
Yes.
Eva. I was not going to bring my phone, and then he made me because of the questions. So
I didn't make you.
made.
Face
What am I going to commit to? I, as a writer, producer, director, will also commit to trying to making my cruise and my world look like the world.
Good.
Yeah.
David, what's your question for Angela?
So your film, Professor Marston and His Women, that film largely has white people as the protagonist. For you as a woman of color, did you meet with any opposition, any raised eyebrows in relation to you being the one who wrote and directed that film?
That's such an interesting question. I didn't at all, which is interesting because the conversation, I think, is really heated around that. But I've always, because consider myself a queer filmmaker, and I've always had to juggle identities because they haven't landed in one place. And so for me, that was a very queer film, and when I did my press and as I did it, I kind of created it with my queer head, and I've always, historically, things are changing now, but kind of had to pick between the black community or the gay community. When I came up, there were, I don't think, any black queer people that I knew when I got here. So it's always been kind of identity hopping for me, and I'm really excited. I'm working on another project now that actually merges the two, so that'd be exciting.
David, if you don't mind, how is that different for you as a filmmaker? Being able to merge the two?
It's incredibly liberating. I think it's always, I used to, when I got here, I would say, I would use the gap in people's consciousness. It's almost, I particularly think that Hollywood is very segregated, and that I would often go into mostly white spaces. But when I first got here in the early 2000s, I would go into studio spaces and they'd be like, is she a boy or girl, black or white? Like, they were totally super confused about who I was. But the confusion helped me because there was this gap, and I just start talking in the gap, and then I kind of just make my own category. And so, but to kind of have culture catch up to where I've been feels good.
I just want to add to that, because being Mexican American, I've always straddled the hyphen. And people go, oh, you're 50%, Mexican, you're 50% American. I'm like, no, I'm 100% Mexican, and I'm 100% American at all times. Yep. And so you're that all the time. Yeah. Why we have to choose those buckets is, and navigate society's, construction of those buckets is hard. And so I applaud you for merging the two.
Mr. Apatow?
Well, I was watching you speak on the YouTube last night, and you told
me there's video that I
late
had no
night
idea
viewing at the Apatow house.
I went down a full wormhole of your appearances, but you told a great story about how you approach going into meetings when you're pitching things, because you feel like there's a moment where the people you're meeting with aren't sure what to make of you, and how you take advantage of that. Could you tell them that story?
I do think that, this is ironic where I say, make the racism work for you. I've been here a bit, so that's kind of, you have to start thinking and really kind of ass backwards way in order to just kind of get access to where you're trying to be. And so part of that confusion I was talking about, that gap, I think I'm almost like a student of race in Hollywood, because I'm always clocking it wherever I go. I go on the Paramount lot, and the black people still nod to each other, because it's like, oh, you got through the gate, I got through the gate, all right, we're here, we're doing it. But I still invariably, when I go up to any studio to this day, I go up, and usually the black people are at security, security's got a lock at all the studios, and they give me a really good parking space, which is amazing. But then I walk up, and they're always like, the messenger entrance is that way. Just, 75% of the time. Just look up, look down, go to the other door. And I always have to explain, no, I'm here to direct the movie, or I'm here to do something. So as much as I think Hollywood feels like it's progressive, but I feel like it's really not in reality, and kind of solving that, how we think we are and how we actually are, is one of the gaps I want to close.
And with that, Judd, Angela, one of you's back in the hot seat. Thank you, Angela.
Wow. A lot of stuff. Give me the mic. I'll hold the mic.
Now,
just leaving you.
I've got a lot of equipment. I'm a hoarder. I won't watch that show on Netflix. I want to hoard and keep it all.
I actually want you to answer. Eva's question, but before that, I want to ask you, as the other white guy up on the stage, we have a lot of privilege, and a lot of white people don't like talking about it because it's like, I think a lot of Americans don't like talking about class.
Yes.
They don't like talking about ideology either. But when they talk about racial privilege and gender privilege, it's real. And it's something that is affecting people, and it's the discussions that we're having now in our community, and I hope in communities all over the world, to talk about this. You've talked about this a lot in your films, and you've talked about this a lot, certainly on Twitter, where you talk all the time, my friend. But I wanted to get a sense from you is, what does that mean to you, that privilege, and what are you doing to make sure that maybe other people have an equal playing field?
Well, one thing that I noticed with me and a lot of people is, we hire people. We're in a position to staff the office and staff the movie. And if you pay no attention whatsoever, you will just wind up hiring everyone that looks exactly like you. And there does come a moment, I hope for everyone, where they realize how wrong that is. And it takes so little to change that. I mean, I'm hopefully directing a movie this summer. It's one phone call to your line producer, and you just say, let's make sure we're diverse, and let's keep talking about the different things that we can do to help. And I think everyone needs to wake up and want to do that. Not something, there are places and studios where they say, well, this is the rule. But it really has to be that, like, in your heart, it's the right thing to do, and you're trying to help lift people up.
So to that, then what are you going to do to commit to change?
What am I going to do? I have a similar situation where, we do a TV show, Crashing, and we do half of all the directors are diverse. And we've had an incredible experience with all sorts of people that, we didn't know before, because it does force you to go, well, who's out there? Because, it's easy to go, I've worked with these people, I'll just keep using these 4 dudes every time. And suddenly you're going, okay, well, who else is great? And you start watching tapes, you start watching shows, and then suddenly you realize, oh, these people are incredible. Wow, they're kind of better than most of the people we used before. And, I hope to continue doing that. And for me personally, the thing that I noticed was a lot of people have great stories to tell. So people would say to me, what are you going to do to tell diverse stories? And what I realized is I can partner with people. You don't always want me to be the voice for you, but I can meet Kumail Nanjiani and Emily Gordon, and they could say, well, this is what it's like to be from Pakistan and an immigrant in the United States, and I can work with them on the script and help them put that together so that they get a chance to tell their story.
Now, part of, obviously, one of the partnerships you did do was with Lena Dunham on Girls. And, there was a lot of acclaim for that. There was also some backlash for that, too. And I wanted to get a sense from you, what are some of the lessons you learned from that partnership that now inform more partnerships or more work that you do going forward?
Well, that was a really remarkable experience, because you have to remember, at that time, there weren't many shows that were starring women where the lead woman was the executive producer, the writer, and the director. So she was breaking down this enormous wall that a lot of people have walked through, and she did it really well by making a fantastic show and showing that a woman like her deserved to be heard. And then quickly people said, okay, well, what else can the show do? So it's not just about women, and I think we had a learning curve over the course of our 6 years to realize that there was a lot more we should be doing with the show.
David, your question for Judd? You can. It's your house. We asked her a question.
No, but you're asking. You're asking my question.
I will ask your question.
Okay.
I'd like a much harder question.
Oh.
You want a what?
I would like a very difficult question.
Well, let David go, and then I'll think of a new one.
Okay.
I didn't mean that for David.
So something that I have heard a lot of, in the last year or two is white male directors in particular complaining about the fact that, it's difficult to get hired now. You've got to be a black woman. You've got to, poor us. Now, we know historically when there is a movement like Me Too or any kind of movement, there tends to be a pendulum swing. I would argue that there will be some kind of pendulum swing. We're in a moment right now where the pendulum may swing again, and I have a fear that these white men who now feel marginalized and I know, it was hard to say, but they feel it. And my fear is that there will be some kind of backlash, some kind of subversive, undercover, insidious need for revenge whenever that backlash happens. Is my fear warranted or not?
Well, I think it probably is warranted in some way, and I don't know if it would be conscious. It could be unconscious. I think that the business, there's a reason why it's in a certain groove all the time. For instance, there's been all this talk about opportunities for women, and then last year the amount of female directors went down, not up. And so that's how hard it is to turn things around.
There's not a single female on the Best Directors list for the Oscar nominations today.
Again.
None.
So whether it's like unconscious bias or not, there is a resistance to a lot of this change. And I think like the quietness of the resistance is what's more dangerous, because it won't be spoken out loud. It won't be about revenge. It's just I can choose between making this movie and that movie, and just for some reason I lean left. And I've heard it too, where people said there are certain types of movies that not many people are going to go to, and so when there's a hit like Black Panther, or Wonder Woman, it really like blows open all these terrible theories that people really live by. I mean, they did not think those movies would make money. Maybe in the last year they're like, well, I guess we got to take the gamble now or we're going to get in trouble. But they certainly didn't make those movies for a long time for a reason, because they believed really dumb theories about what people wanted to see.
Which was not actually backed up by financial evidence.
Right.
If you looked at global markets, it was not true at all.
So I'm going to piggyback on that because, so what do you think, when you were talking about gatekeepers earlier, the gatekeepers of all of this that are scared of that change, how do we change them? How do we get them, it's not backed up financially, doesn't make any sense. Movies do make money that have people of color and women, so how do you change those gatekeepers' minds?
Well, I think you also have to change the gatekeepers, we all do those meetings, and we know the type of people that we're meeting with, and there's been a little bit of a change, but nowhere near enough. And you have to feel it from, the entry-level creative execs that, over the next 5-10 years, that soon the leaders of the production companies and the studios and the networks will be much different than they are right now. Because without that, they just tend to, go in the wrong direction.
But I also think you have to hold people's feet to the fire about that to make sure that happens. Because I think there's a natural tendency, especially in this industry, to go back to the status quo. You talked about backlash, and I think that is something that's real. And I think you have to, time and time again, this industry has pretended to make progressions, and those progressions have lasted about 18 months, and they've eased on back again.
I just want to add, too, also, when you create that pipeline of talent, so all those people that will then rise up, and to hold those people accountable once they arrive. Because I remember being in meetings, pitching something, and there's one Latino in the room, and I'm like, you get it, right? And he was like, I don't get it. And I was like, well, no.
Well, that's true with...
Like a gentrification happened of him.
Well, that's also true with the heads
once he rose. And so it's like, if any of y'all in this room actually rise to that spot, don't forget where you came from.
Angela,
can I add on? Yes, I'm going to ask you. I wanted to add on a thing, which is Dr. Stacy Smith, who's done so much incredible work on this. This was regarding women, and I'd be interested to see what she said about race. She basically said, one's a token, two's conspiracy, three's a gang, right? And it was basically that you needed 4 women in any group to make change. Do you know what I mean? So if it's all like, if they said, I hired one woman, she can't do anything. She's got nothing. They're like, great. And then 2, they're like, oh, those 2 are just ganging up. And then something. And 3, and they're like, okay, ladies. And then so that there needs to be a kind of preponderance of change, because it's always on the one person to speak. And then you speak up in those meetings, and then they're like, oh, okay, great. Glad we checked that box.
Well, for a long time, there have been many female heads of studios, and it did not change the amount of female-driven films. And so, again, like the financial drive sometimes is the reason why those things don't happen. And
But I
that's
also
what's so
think,
wrong about it.
Judd, to that point, though, when you mention people like that, also remember those studios are owned by conglomerates and corporations that are publicly traded, and they're things that we can do as individuals. You know, there's for instance, many years there was a great group of nuns who used to go and get enough stock in a company they could speak at a general meeting, and they would go and talk and make people talk about things. So I think that you can always hold people accountable. You just have to show up sometimes, and that's the most important part. And with that,
my question. I don't think, in his 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here, Dr. Martin Luther King noted the limits of Northern liberalism. Negroes have proceeded from a premise that equality means what it says. But when most whites in America, including many of goodwill, he wrote, proceed from a premise that equality is a loose expression for improvement, white America is not even psychologically organized to close the gap. So my question is, what prevents white liberals from being, quote, psychologically organized to close the gap, and how do we change those barriers?
Oh.
That's a smart question. I dropped out of college, and halfway through I was like, man, I should have finished. Well, I think off the top of my head that I think it's really just about being able to feel and have compassion and empathy for other people. And it's very easy to keep your heart closed. And that, I think, is a lot of why things don't change, because people don't want to feel the pain. They don't want to, realize how much people have suffered, how much they struggle to get into the business. They're pretty shut down emotionally. And if you bothered to feel, there's more of a chance that you would make the leap to do something. But I think people keep their head down and they're trying to make money and they're only thinking about their narrow worlds. And because they don't feel, they don't do anything. And sometimes you have to look at it. I mean, I get made fun of because I'm on Twitter all day long and I'm like ranting and raving and reading everything, but I'm also just trying to stay connected to what is happening, to the suffering out there, so that like I'm broken open a little bit so that I care. But I think there's a lot of people, honestly, they really don't actually care. They don't pay much attention to it.
I have a theory, too, which I was just going to float. I haven't kicked the tires on it much. But as I've been kind of going around this year, paying attention to Hollywood specifically, I feel like many white, like everybody is a white liberal. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, so why, if Hollywood is so liberal, do we have all this systemic, like it's just obvious. I was going to challenge people to look up 3 times a day, just wherever they were, and just see if their spaces are at all integrated, and I'd just be curious what the thing is. But I feel like there's now an embarrassment. Do you know what I mean? I feel that white liberals are supposed to be liberal, so they're supposed to not be racist as a like de facto thing. And then, but they also have no people of color around them, but they have no way to access without reaching out. Do you know what I mean? There has to, and the scary thing is if you reach out, people are just, fuck you. Like, I don't want to be, like, I feel like there's this kind of people of color are rightfully very also closed up to that reaching out. So this is why it's amazing that there's days like this. Thank you, Ava. To do that. But I've been trying to kind of figure out how we can keep our hands open so that we can allow for people to also try. And I think if we could try more from everybody and put aside some of the anger that's wrapped up in us, we can maybe bridge the gap.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems when it comes to being white, liberal generally, or someone who's supposed to be conscious from a societal point of view, is that we are focused on how we are perceived as opposed to how we love. To love sacrificially is to consistently put others before yourself, to think about them and what they are actually going through. And I think a lot of what we are going through in this country right now is to do with how am I perceived? How do you think I'm racist? Do you think I'm philanthropic? Do you think that I'm woke? Do you think that I am all these hot button things that I should? Do you think I'm a feminist? As opposed to forget that. Do you know that your plight is meaningful to me in an intentional way where I engage with you, I listen to you, I am genuinely interested in what you have to say, and that is a point of education for me. That is where I think there is a huge gap, and it's because there is a lack of what is love? What actually is love? To love is to sacrifice. And this country, generally speaking, even though it says it's about leave no man behind, it's about the other person, the American dream, a huge part of the American dream, is about self. And the only way that there can be reparation for evils done in the past is to acknowledge that sins were committed against other people. That's to look at someone else, not yourself, as opposed to, no, America the brave, America the great, what's your perception of me? Until this country, liberals, everyone in their own enclave and home can go, I am going to love you above myself, that will not change.
We want to hear more from our panel, but we also want to hear from some of you guys. Does anybody have a question for anyone? Oh, you go to the hot seat. But anybody like to ask any questions of our panel? Well, then I guess you're moving on to the hot seat. By the way, David, that was beautiful. That was beautiful, man.
Poetic.
So, Judd, question.
Okay.
We should have got the phone sponsored.
How has the business let you down, and how has it come through for you in your career?
Ooh, interesting. Well, I talked a little bit about it. You know, when I moved here 20 years ago, I'm from Texas. I'm 9th generation Mexican, so I'm very American. So when I moved here, the industry was like, you're not Latin enough, because I didn't speak Spanish. And then I would go in on American parts, and they're like, well, you're too Latin. And so I did Italian parts. They were like, Longoria. I was like, yeah. So it helped me that way. But I think that it's so funny because people think diversity is this new hot button, hot word, you know, box you're going to check. And I remember 20 years ago when it was like Ricky Martin and Living La Vida Loca and J-Lo, and they were saying, there's this Latin explosion. And I'm like, yes, I arrived in Hollywood at the right time. And then nothing. You know what I mean? Like it didn't, you know, it didn't snowball into this amazing opportunities for Latinos. And so I feel like we're taking baby steps forward, but there's still so much to do in the industry, and that's why I got behind the camera. That's why I direct. That's why I produce, because I was like, I'm not going to wait for somebody to create my story. And if you look at Latinos in particular, we're the fastest growing demographic in the United States, hands down. We're 18% of the population, but we're 23% of ticket buyers. We're the largest group of ticket buyers to movies, and yet in the last decade, we've had 4% speaking roles in movies. 4% speaking. That's not even a lead role. That's, did you say a word? I'm not an extra. So, yeah, this industry's been great to me because I was lucky. And I did a show called Desperate Housewives where I was playing, we were playing a Mexican couple, and we were the richest people on the block. And our showrunner said, because he grew up in Orange County, and the richest person on their block was Gabriel Marquez, or whatever his name was, and ABC asked him to change that family to something else. And he said, no, because when I grew up, the richest family in my block was this Mexican family down the street. So it was great playing, you know, the most affluent person on that show, being a person of color. And we had a white gardener, which was groundbreaking.
David, your question?
So I know you're heavily involved in the Time's Up movement, and a fear of mine, and I expressed this at the Women's Summit recently, is that the Time's Up movement, or the Me Too movement, I should say, and Time's Up's involvement in it, is an incredible thing, both for our industry, for this country, for the world. A fear of mine is that if Me Too doesn't at some point also becomes synonymous with the idea of redemption for certain people, that it is a movement that has a sell-by date on it, in my opinion. I voiced these kind of sentiments at the Women's Summit, and some women approached me and said, it's too soon. It's too soon to entertain the idea of redemption in relation to this. Is that something you agree with? And if so, when will it no longer be too soon?
Great question. And I do want to clarify, Me Too and Time's Up, they're related, but Me Too, if it wasn't for all of these amazingly brave women to tell their stories, Time's Up never would have existed. And so the Me Too movement created Time's Up, which is, a legal defense fund. We have many spokes to this amazing work that we're trying to do. Ambler Tamblyn wrote in the New York Times an article, I think it was in the New York Times, I can't remember, and she answered that so eloquently that I'm going to butcher it, but she said basically that it's too soon. I'm thinking about my liberation right now. I can't think about your salvation. That's not my job as a woman. I'm navigating right now through my own shit. How am I supposed to figure out how to make you feel better? I gotta make you feel better now? I am focused over here. So I agree with you. We've got to figure that out. And I do think there's a way. One big way to do that is including more men. We've got to include the men in this movement. We've got to have more men speaking out. I forget the name of the gentleman that spoke at my house. Wade Davis, who was amazing. And he had an amazing talk to men about how you can act right now. And he what did he say? He said, oh gosh, I'm butchering all of it, but he basically was saying that, hey guys, it's up to our job to make you guys feel comfortable. This is what he said: civil rights movements, all these movements in the past have never been for the people. The civil rights movement wasn't for black people. It was for everybody else who didn't know. Black people knew they needed rights. We know this. This movement is for you and you who don't know that we need rights. The women's movement wasn't for women. It wasn't for women to know, like, hey guys, we should be able to vote. We knew we should vote. It was for everybody else who didn't agree with that. So this Time's Up movement is for everybody else right now to say time's up on the abuse of power.
But that's exactly my point, is that if it's for the oppressor, so to speak, the men, and they are not being reached in the midst of this movement, how does the connectivity happen? Because I know a lot of men who treat Me Too as a nuclear cloud. They are burying their heads in the sand and they are waiting for it to pass. And talking about a pendulum swing, my fear is that that will happen, and by the time it is starting to go out of vogue, if they are not reached, if it is for me, if it is for men, if this movement is for us, and we feel excluded from it, how does it become effective for the future? That's my concern and my question.
Well, I think why do men feel excluded? Like, I can't answer that.
No.
That's not for me to figure out.
No,
you know what I mean? Meaning that's not for. I agree with you. We have to include them. Angela, please jump in. But it got really hot here. Did you guys put the heat on this chair?
It's called the hot seat.
No, it feels like really hot. Literally heat up. But I hear what you're saying. But again, I feel like we're 1 year old. Yeah. Time's Up's 1. We just turned 1, and so we're figuring out our steps. And one of the first things we did was to unite women across industries, farm workers, hotel workers, domestic workers, because our problems are not the same as their problems, but there was a commonality with it. And so I think we're just figuring this out, and we do need to include more men. Sorry, go ahead.
I think there is the answer in that the question is always, what is Me Too, or what is Time's Up going to do to solve the problem of the men? And we're just like, but men, why do we have to? I think you answered it in that there may be a backlash, or if people are opening their hearts and are kind of looking and really trying to affect change as opposed to holding on to power and hoping that it goes away, then to think inwardly I think this is what Wade was saying, to how can I stop the pendulum as a man? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm in those conversations. We're not in, nobody talks about, you know, everybody runs screaming. I don't know, like from, do you know what I mean? But we are not privy to those conversations. The backlash of which you speak, do you know what I mean? We sense, we hear, it could be, but that is for conversations in those places that have access to those, the honesty of what you're articulating. And in those spaces, we need allies. We need you guys to step into the void and to say, hey, instead of asking them when they're gonna, you know, let us out of the doghouse, how can we work with each other to do it?
I am privy to those conversations, and that's why I ask the question, which is that, you know, in a world where patriarchy is a very real thing, when you see a movement that is female-led, is energized, has power to it, and you are in any way an enlightened man, one of the things you do not want to be accused of is patriarchy. And if you are saying, I'm an ally, I would like to be, what I have felt, and I think can be felt, is no. This is our thing, and we know what men tend to do when they come alongside us. And historically, it's true. You know, you get male allies, and are you here to take over? Are you here to listen and learn? Are you here to be a true ally? There is a distrust along the lines of why we got here in the first place. So my point is that it's not that there is a lack of willing. Information is filtering through that makes it hard to go, I'm an ally, because I then look like I'm trying to be a leader, because that is one of the things. The first thing I get told when I say I'm an ally is, come and lead something. And then I go, whoa, yeah, what is that? Are you okay with that even being I don't want to, I just want you to know I'm for you. And even that has been something like, do you see what I mean? So
yeah, but we've got, because we've been, you know, hundreds of years.
I get it.
Of course we're distrustful.
I get it.
But I mean, and so I think that's on you. I put it, that's on you guys. I mean, on men, not on you, David.
No.
Not on you, David, but I mean on y'all.
But no,
all of us.
I love the applause, but I'm here to say to you, I am for you, and I'm telling you, this thing has a sell-by date. And if we don't figure it out, soon, I'm just concerned that folks like me are going to go, I was...
But David,
you know.
maybe part of it is exactly folks like you, someone standing up and saying, I am an ally. And by saying you're an ally, you actually say, I'm here. And when that time is there, then we, all of us, and I hope all men actually, all men, then are part of something. But that is a part of the time.
I'm saying that time is now. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that time is now.
Agreed.
That's all.
And part of that time is now is, Angela, the last question is yours.
Hi.
Good segue.
Nice.
Phone sponsored by?
Okay. Let's see. For Eva. Eva Uma. Okay. In light of the horrors caused by both family detention and mass incarceration, how can the Black community and the Latinx community join forces and use our collective power to fight our common enemy, private prisons that make over $1 billion a year in ICE contracts?
Yeah. Wow. Oh, it's a great question because
I also have
a follow-up?
An answer, but no.
Oh, you have the answer. Just say the answer,
I have
Angela.
an answer.
You say the answer.
No, I want to hear your response
No.
first.
I will say I have always, I've been pondering this so many times. I just talked to Kenya Barris and I said, why aren't Black and Brown uniting?
Yes.
And I will tell you why.
Yes.
Because it's been set up to keep us separated. It's our society set up to go, no, they're different and you're different. There's actually, I'm actually doing a movie at HBO called A Class Apart, and it's in the 1950s. It was the first Mexican-American lawyer who went to the Supreme Court. First one they had ever seen. And he said, look, we're a class apart because we're not Black, but we're not white. And Hispanics in the 50s could ride some buses, could not ride some buses. They could drink out of some water fountain, could not drink out of some water fountains. And so he was like, we're brown, but we're white. You know, and that's been a really, since colonization has been, you know, really this, no, you're with us because we're not black. And so I want to figure that out because it is, we have a common enemy. And right now, I mean, not more than incarceration, people of color, Hispanics and blacks, over-index in our prisons. And that's not by chance. That is very purposeful. You know, Florida had a measure on the ballot to reinstate ex-cons voting rights, and it passed, which was amazing because there is a very systematic approach to cutting this group of people out to have a voice in this country. And it's not the black voice, it's the black and brown voices. And so I don't know the answer to that, but I do think there's something that has to happen because we have been taught to stay separate and don't talk to each other.
Well, I'd like to thank all of you for helping us. You got one more thing? Yeah.
Because I had an answer, which is, okay, everybody, there's this thing called realmoneymoves.org. Basically, realmoneymoves.org. If you bank with Chase, Wells Fargo, or Bank of America, your money is supporting the $1 billion in private prisons.
Yeah.
So say the name again.
If it's Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or Chase, if you've got credit cards with them, if you put your money in those banks, they provide debt and they are sending your money to support the private prisons, and they get $1 billion in contracts from the government, and our supply is $1 billion, so we get $2 billion a year that you are supporting. So when you read about the family detention and you're horrified, and then you go and make a deposit into your bank, they have it all cycled, and it's not till the money starts to get cut off from these people. So I encourage you to go to realmoneymoves.org, just because I didn't know that. So then I called and I said,
thank you
get me
so
out.
much.
Bye.
Give me out. Give me out.
Put your money where your morals are. Thank you so much to our amazing panel, Ava, Angela, David, Judd. Thank you so much for having us, and we are out of here.
To me like this. Hey, you guys there now? Should I start from the top? Because I want to thank them. That was an incredible conversation. Eva, Judd, Angela, David, and Dominic. And what she just said about the banks is so important. We have a responsibility. We can make little moves that make a huge impact. And the other thing that I want to say about conditioning is that keeps colonization and the white supremacists in power. So we've got to consider our own conditioning and how we can change our minds. That was an incredible conversation on race and representation. Now make sure you go on social media and you hashtag How We Heal to continue this conversation, because all I can keep thinking about every time somebody spoke was, yeah, it was like, you know, going like the MC over here trying to talk into the that was so incredible. So let's keep that going. Remember to hashtag How to Heal. All over the country, artists within the Array community are acknowledging this National Day of Racial Healing. One particular friend of Array is an award-winning conceptual artist who ties in themes of identity, history, and pop culture into his art. Let's check out Hank Willis Thomas as he talks about blending his life and journey into his work.
There have been many points in my own life where my personhood has been questioned and not even really acknowledged. When they see a black man, are they seeing a person first, or are they seeing a black man? If I'm an artist, does that make me a better person, or is it enough to just be a human being? My life is the most successful and amazing work of art that I have ever made and always am in the process of making. Coming from a photographic background and being an artist and recognizing the way stories can be manipulated, we should always be questioning the truths we're told because there's always more to the story. I think that my personhood and my humanity is where all of my creative actions spark from, and the more we embrace the connection between our personhood and our creativity, I think the better off we all are. As many of us who are kind of trying to engage and really feel like it's important to be visionary, not reactionary at times like these, where so much of what each of us want to do is to respond to the things that anger us, but how do we dream bigger? And that's the real responsibility of an artist. Whenever we use our bodies, our voices to make a political statement, and it's meant to affect and shape our culture, and our culture is what creates our political life. It's amazing the amount of social change we've just witnessed when it comes to being at least more embracing of diversity of opinions and diversity of experiences. And that's a result of people who weren't artists actually creating campaigns and doing protests, making memes and creating poetry. And the rapid pace at which this happens is awesome in the way that it becomes collaborative. You know, that it's not just about this singular leader and their followers, it's about many people coming together to make a tidal wave of change. I think it's all part of a continuum. The past is present in everything we do. The reason I look at historical artifacts is often because we don't see the connection between what was happening 50, 60, or a few hundred years ago and our lives today. And people make history every day, and they're now teenagers and very old people who are really changing the cultural narrative that 100 years from now, there won't be a way to tell the story of this year in the way that previous generations could kind of sum everything up. The reason it's important to recognize the hybridity that exists within any racial or cultural demographic and also any person is akin to what it means to make a beautiful image that help us to define, shape, and to see beauty in the world.
Give it up. That was a look at the impressive work of Hank Willis Thomas. We're going to move into our second conversation of the day, which is all about addressing the uncomfortable questions we face when we categorize ourselves, and also when others categorize us. Joining our conversation on identity and inclusion, please welcome actress and activist Laverne Cox, author Jacqueline Woodson, along with our moderator Amy Goodman of award-winning news program Democracy Now!
Well, it is a great honor to be here. And being the journalist I am, just a few breaking news items. Okay, I just had to. We just came from the picket line, the second largest school district in the United States on strike, but an announcement has just been made by both sides that the strike agreement, a strike agreement has been reached. This is one of the posters we picked up on the street. Teachers working for the people. That an agreement has been reached. We'll find out some more details. And, well, according to the union president, he thinks that the teachers will be voting for this, but that's the latest, greatest news from the streets. And I always carry around the books of people who I admire and read. And today, with Jacqueline Woodson here, just a couple to show you, three of the 32 books she has written. For children, The Day You Begin. For young adults, Brown Girl Dreaming, which has won so many awards. And if you're stuck in the airport because the government has been shut down for a month now, and like us, because of climate change coming from New York City, well, the plane froze, so we were on the tarmac for hours. They couldn't unlock the doors. The water froze for the entire flight. The crew was afraid to come in because they were so cold outside. If you've got Jacqueline Woodson's books with you, you have nothing to worry about. That's her young adult book, and one of her books, Another Brooklyn. Just want to talk about the people who must be read and must be talked about. And finally, this latest news just came over that the Supreme Court of the United States has upheld the transgender ban for people in the military right now. It might not surprise you to know that it was a 5-4 decision with Judge John Roberts, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, and the newest justice, Brett Kavanaugh, allowing the ban to go into effect as it was debated. Ruth Bader Ginsburg from her recovery bed, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan said that the injunction should be in place on the ban, but they did not prevail. Which brings us to our first question today. What an honor it is to be with the two of you in this discussion about racial healing, racial justice. Laverne, you have broken so many ceilings. Among those barriers, in one of the accolades, you were the first trans person nominated for a daytime Emmy. Is that right?
I don't. We're correcting stuff like that.
No, correct me.
Oh God. It's lovely. I'm very grateful. I believe I'm the first trans person to win a daytime Emmy as an executive producer.
So, but you're
I think that's right.
I mean, you have broken through in such an important way in the media. And as you've pointed out, 84% of Americans say they don't know a trans person. So it's the media where people have to learn. So when you hear this story of the ban being upheld by the Supreme Court, your response and what you think needs to happen to break these barriers and change these laws?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised, given the nature and the makeup of who is on the Supreme Court. When I look sort of historically and try to put things in perspective, this is part of a larger pattern of the attack of transgender people that really probably maybe started 4 years ago or so. I think after the passage of marriage equality, some conservative folks needed another sort of group to scapegoat in part. And since I arguably say 2014, trans people have been more visible in the media than we ever have before through YouTube, etc. The real lived experiences of trans people are actually actually out there for people to access. And so there was a conversation about backlash and in the other earlier discussion. I think that is also going on, that we've seen unprecedented introductions of anti-trans legislation in state legislatures all over the country. There have probably been over 400 pieces of legislation introduced in state legislatures since 2014. Guidelines for how transgender children should be treated in schools were rescinded. Of course, the current administration, they had a leaked memo last year that stated they wanted to change the definition of sex so that basically being what is on your birth certificate, if that's not determinative, then chromosomes. I don't know what kind of society does chromosome test. And the idea of that is that to give trans people no legal recourse under the law. They do not want what a lot of courts have determined, that trans people are covered under sex discrimination under Title VII and Title IX. I could go on. I could go on and on. So there's so many, and trans people are being murdered with impunity. It's disgusting. So there's all of these things happening in the world, and I think part of that is about backlash. I think it's because we're more visible, then folks are creating these arguments. I did a deep dive recently on YouTube. Somehow some anti-trans video video came up, and I was like, let me see what these people are saying. And I usually don't expose myself to that kind of thing. And it was really fascinating how coordinated the anti-trans movement, I would say. It's very coordinated. They have very similar talking points. They're groups that are organized just to introduce anti-trans legislation all over the country. I mean, it can't be a coincidence that all these pieces of legislation are being introduced. So there's a very coordinated movement to basically attempt to define gender based on what you were assigned at birth, ultimately based on genitalia, because that's usually how we assign gender at birth. And so it's a larger cultural issue. I think the corruption of the government, too. I mean, the way the Supreme Court is stacked now is the result, I would argue, of a lot of corruption. And so all of these things are connected. And so then we have a really, really huge project to really have justice. It's because so many things have to be addressed, because the corruption and the discrimination are happening on so many different levels. One thing I want to say about racial healing, though, since that's why we're here today, is that I really believe that Tarana Burke, in her most recent TED Talk, contended that we are collectively traumatized over the reckoning that has been going on with sexual assault and harassment over the past few years. I think that the last conversation suggested some of that. And I think Black people have been collectively traumatized for a very, very long time based on the levels of discrimination going on. And trauma is really, really hard to heal. I've been working with a somatic therapist for over 2 years now, and we've been doing a lot of uncomfortable, intense work to do that healing. And I think that the piece of racial healing has to start with each and every one of us. I abhor the culture of us versus them that is rampant now. And I think for me, it's not about white people are this, or men are this, or non-trans people are this. It is about all of us having been raised in what Bell Hooks calls imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. I add to that cisnormative, heteronormative, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. There are more things we can add. We've all been raised in that culture, and so we've all internalized negative things, I think, about Black people, about trans people. There's such a lack of information, and these things, in coming to consciousness, we have to unlearn. And I think it has to be a constant process of personal, critical interrogation and being willing to be wrong and then being willing to transform. I think transformation is possible, but I think it is only possible when the person who wants to be transformed, could be transformed, is willing and is willing to do the work. And I'll stop there.
On that issue of work, I wanted to ask you, as you were just wrapping up the next season of Orange is the New Black in New York, the issue that of both trans people in prison, and this being depicted in a fictional way, which you're very comfortable with, feel that's maybe the best way of getting the truth out, you've said, but also the challenges you faced on the set. Were you also educating the writers and the producers and the other actors?
That's certainly been an experience of mine through the years. I've often found myself educating collaborators. That never really came up with Orange. I never had conversations with our writers or producers about trans issues. I got the scripts and I did my job, and every situation is different. And when at all possible, I mean, there may have been a few educational moments on Orange, but a lot of the ways in which I proceed is that I'm myself. I show up prepared to do my job, and I think I'm openly trans, and so I think what a lot of people have said to me over the years is that they've just gotten to know me as a person. And when I'm shooting a television show, it ultimately, especially if I'm just an actress and not producing, is actually not my job to educate anyone. You know, I think if something bad happened and it needs to be addressed, that's a different situation. And I'm proud to say nothing bad has happened on that set. That is has a crew that has been mostly women from the beginning.
Jacqueline, why do you write?
First and foremost, because I love it. I think, I know when I was young, I had a teacher who said, when you choose a career, choose something you love doing, because you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. And that was the thing that, from a really young age, I really loved doing. And as a kid growing up and not seeing representations of myself in literature, I got mad about it, and I wanted to change it. And I knew that the only way I could change it was to write myself into the narrative and to write the people I love who had historically not been represented into the narrative. And of course, as a child, I didn't have that language for it, but I had the rage, I had the anger, and I was compelled to do it. I just couldn't imagine having grown up knowing how much I mattered in the world to not see myself mattering in literature. I thought that someone was lying to me, and they were. They weren't. Our stories weren't getting told. Writers who look like me weren't getting published in terms of writing for young people and all people. So I wanted to change that.
And when you walk into a classroom, talk about the kids you see, how they respond to you, and what you're trying to do there and those kind of dialogues you have.
So right now, I'm serving a 2-year term as the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. And with that, I'm going around the country talking to young people. And for the most part, the National Ambassador gets to choose their platform. And it's through the Library of Congress and the Children's Book Council. It's not through the White House. And my platform is Reading Equals Hope Times Change. And the crews that I want, the groups of young people I want to influence are kids in juvenile detention centers and kids in Title I schools, which are schools where kids are very underserved. And so I've been going around the country talking to young people, and there's this hunger. There's this hunger to see Black queer women walk into their classroom. There's this hunger to see people who are telling their stories walk into their juvenile detention centers, not only to hear what I have to say, but to actually see them, to see the young people as people with possibility and with stories and with the right to tell those stories. So it's been a lot of things. It's been heartbreaking. I was after EJI, we were there for the conference, and then I went to a juvenile detention center nearby that was predominantly white guys, and we talked for a long time, and it was fabulous. And as I was leaving, every single one of them threw up the white power sign, and said "White Power, Miss Woodson." I guess I should be happy they call me Miss Woodson, but it's that kind of back and forth going into juvenile detention centers where everyone is of color. We were talking about one of my books, Visiting Day, and the kids were talking, a lot of the girls were talking about visiting their dads in prison as young people. And this one girl talked about her 4-month-old daughter coming to visit her and how hard it was to say goodbye to her. So I think that the work definitely fills me in some way and constantly breaks my heart, and bearing witness to the whole school to prison pipeline again and again in this country, bearing witness to the prison industrial complex and the impact it's having on Black and brown lives is heartbreaking, and also makes me know again that there's so much work left to do.
Talk about Thomas Jefferson Woodson and who he's named after, and the president you are a descendant of.
So Thomas Jefferson Woodson is my great-great-great-grandfather. Proven is that we're descendants of Sally Hemings. There's a lot of back and forth about whether Thomas Jefferson had kids with Sally Hemings. We know he did. Whether or not the Woodsons are actually actual descendants of that. It's interesting because we have this huge reunion the Woodsons do that takes place in Ohio, then takes place, where is that place we can now get buried that he lived? Tell me.
Monticello.
Yeah, Monticello. And I write about it in Brown Girl Dreaming. I don't really care, right? I know my family's fabulous. I know we're fabulous because we were part of the Great Migration. I know that we're fabulous because Black people have this deep history of resistance and making a way out of no way and really getting by on very little until until we've created some kind of change. And so the Thomas Jefferson thing, it's interesting because it's really important to a lot of Woodsons and a lot of historians. I think it's important to me in terms of knowing that I came from, that I can trace my line. And I think that's one of the tragedies of African Americans coming to this country the way we did, that not only for so many of us, our history stops on American shores because we don't have that access to a past before then, but also because of enslavement and that history of a country wanting to own brown bodies, that so much of that history was lost in our inability to learn to read and write and hold on to our histories and the separation of families. And as Laverne was talking about, the trauma that becomes a part of our DNA in this way that keeps our stories from being part of a continuum unless we write the hell out of them and make them so.
Laverne and Jacqueline, on the issue of different communities that we all live in your own communities, where do you find it tough to make bridges or open dialogues that you don't expect obstacles to be presented that are?
That's a great question. I think being kind of famous or all those things in terms of my life over the past 6 or 7 years or so changes a lot, and I think it mitigates a lot. So I think in some ways my personal story is really relevant, but then sometimes it's really important to focus on the everyday person. The person who is out there really struggling and really dealing with things. And so many trans women I talk to, particularly trans women of color, are still very, very frustrated with what they feel is transphobia in the overall LGBTQ plus community, that there is now lip service and sort of performances of diversity and tokenizing, but not a real investment in the lives of trans people, particularly trans people of color. Within women's movements, there's still a lot of people in my community are still feeling a certain level of exclusion, and just like on a structural level, like gender is still being spoken about in very binary ways, and they feel excluded and just feel like window dressing again. And in Black communities, a lot of my trans siblings are very, very frustrated, and actually just a lot of communities of color. I have friends and have met. I've traveled all over the country meeting young people, and I meet some who have amazingly, incredibly supportive families of all races, and then like there's still LGBTQ youth who are being expelled from their homes for being who they are, and over 40% of all homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. So these are things that are still happening now. Folks are still reporting them. Folks are still finding themselves in harm's way because their communities don't really accept them and don't really value their lives and aren't really doing the work to take care of them and to include them. And so, I mean, it's like, how do we change that is really the billion-dollar question. I think, again, it's really about all of us being willing to take a look at how might I be racist? How might I be transphobic or homophobic? There was about 2010, I was hosting co-hosting a show with my friend Ari Gold at a gay bar called Rock Bar on Christopher Street in New York City. It was like a singing competition or something. And some of the audience members during the show were being really loud, and I got on the microphone and I said, "Y'all are some loud F words." I think you know what I mean. And I got on the microphone and said that, and then these two men after the show came up to me and let me have it. They were like, "How dare you say this to us? People have been saying this to us, and we're divided in our own communities." They were like really upset. And I was like, no. We're reclaiming that word and re-signifying it. And I certainly didn't mean it in a derogatory way. They were like, no, they weren't having it. They really weren't having it. Then my friend Ari comes over, who's an openly gay man. And I was like, Ari, can you believe what they said? And he's one of the folks who's reclaimed that word. And he was like, yeah, that's ridiculous. And then the next day I call my brother, and I was like, I tell him the story, and I'm expecting him to respond the same way Ari did, that, oh, those guys were crazy, and of course you're not homophobic. And I tell my brother the story, and my brother says, "You're not a gay man, you can't reclaim that word." And I was like, well, no, it was this, and I've been called that my whole life, and la, la, la. You're not a gay man, you can't reclaim that word. And then he said it a third time, and I started crying. Because in that moment, why is it still such a hard story? Because I realized in that moment that I had really hurt some people, and that was not my intention, and I haven't seen those guys since to apologize. But it was a really painful moment for me to understand that I had hurt someone I didn't intend to, and I have to make some kind of amends for it, and I have to change. I don't use that word anymore because I can't reclaim it. And I'm not, because I'm an artist, I don't believe that you censor or police language. I actually just did an audiobook, the audiobook for Valley of the Dolls, and that word is all over that book. And it made me cringe every time I had to say it. And so I'm not into telling anybody they can or can't say something. That's just not my thing. But I think it is super important when we do use language that might be a little incendiary to think about the consequences, to think about the people who might be affected by that word, to think about the violence that might be attached to that word. And is that what you want to put out in the universe? You can make that choice. Free speech also has consequences. So, some people are upset. That's maybe one of the consequences. But what kind of people do we really want to be? And I think all this stuff about comedians it's humor when it's supposed to be funny, and they should be able to say these things when it's funny. Again, why not? But what are the consequences? And I think, too, this is the thing that came up in the last panel that I wanted to weigh in on. And so I'm going to weigh in on it now. And the thing about true accountability. I think making your public apology, that your publicist may have, encouraged you to do, I think it's fine. But I think redemption comes from taking actions to do better the next time and let people know. I mean, there was a famous person, whose name I won't say, who was accused of domestic abuse many, many years ago, and they just became indignant after like a year, and they didn't want to talk about it anymore, and they want to move on. And it becomes really difficult sometimes for the public to accept that. And I think, why haven't you been going to domestic abuse shelters in the past year? Why haven't you been going to therapy to understand why you did this? And why aren't you sharing that? That is I think that's part of the healing process. And I think that's part of how we really have redemption. And I think that's part of how change comes. And I think we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to ask for help and to actually admit when we've done something wrong. We have to tell the truth to ourselves first.
That's so true. I completely agree with that. And I think one of the things that has happened is the more we become, the more creative we become, and the more our creativity gets seen, the bigger our platform. And the bigger our platform, the more power we have. And I think that was the shift that happened at that bar. Those two guys probably saw you in this position of power, which you hadn't seen yourself in, right? And that's new. And I think that's, for me, the change in responsibility and the communities that I'm talking to, I'm very fortunate in that I have a village in Brooklyn. I have my partner, I have the aunties, I have the uncles, I have the people helping us raise our kids, and it's and I know there are people who don't have that, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also aware, as this thing shifts in terms of creativity, aside from the work I have to do, but what my platform means and how I'm going to use it, and how I'm going to try not to hurt people using it, right? There's so much more care that has to be taken in how you approach the world with this platform. So I think about my own childhood. I grew up Jehovah's Witness and Muslim, right? So I know I say it like everybody grows up that way every day, but I grew up in a very devout Christian family, and I also grew up with an uncle who came back from prison and had converted to Nation of Islam, so that became a part of our family as well. And for me, that's always been constantly Christianity, Muslim, they're the same thing. It's all in one family. And then getting outside and realizing, wait a second, why are these people fighting? Aren't they the same family? And coming to terms with that. And I feel like I do that a lot in terms of myself as a writer in the world and having hard conversations. Like, this person does not understand what I know and how I know it, or I don't understand what this person knows and how they know it. And so how am I going to sit down and listen and commit to change, commit to trying to do better? We have this audio of, I wrote a book called Harbor Me, and my daughter is one of the voices on it, and my son wanted to be on it. My son is 10, and his reading wasn't where it could be to do an audio book. And so at the end of the book, we have this conversation, and we sit down and have this impromptu conversation that it's not impromptu, obviously, because they recorded it as part of an audio book, and we're in the studio. But we're talking about families, and he's like you and mama, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, some people have two moms or two dads, or some people have a single mom. And he's like, well, some people are gender non-binary and they don't identify as mom or dad. And I was like, okay, you just showed me something that I would have completely missed in this audio book. And it was a moment of pause that I had in the audio. I stopped and I'm like, you're right? Like, mommy just made a mistake and didn't include somebody. And
10 years old.
He's 10, but
work.
He is working me. But it's I feel like I have those moments a lot, especially from the young people, where they go, hey, wait a minute, this is how, and we have a lot of teenage and 20-something girls who, especially around the Me Too movement, of like, no, stop. You told me this is my body, and people need to listen. If I say something happened, then it happened. And we're like, well, can it be kind of fluid, or maybe? And they're like, no. and it is another moment where me as an older woman has to stop and say, okay, Jackie, shift. It's time to learn, and here are the people who are going to teach you. And those are everyday occurrences for me.
Isn't that amazing? I've been so traveling the country and meeting young people, like high school kids will come to some of my talks, even though they're usually at colleges, and the awareness that they have around all these issues gives me a tremendous amount of hope for tomorrow. Certainly there's other things, and I think it's so important to focus on those wonderful things, those wonderful young people who really will hopefully help us bring this home, this equity, justice thing.
Yeah, I definitely have so much faith. I mean, I think our big job is to get out of their way.
So as we wrap up this discussion, we're coming off of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. He would have been 90 years old. And decades ago, he gave that famous speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial, 1963, the I Have a Dream speech. Just this weekend in that very place, a Native American man was drumming. This morning on Democracy Now! We had him on the broadcast, Nathan Phillips. And he walked into a situation after the first Indigenous March, which took place last Friday in Washington, D.C., where he saw two different groups of people sort of going at it, and he got scared. He saw a group of African-American men, maybe 4 or 5 of them. And then he saw well over 100 kids, many of them wearing MAGA hats, Make America Great Again. And he thought this was not a good situation. How could he bring peace to it? So he walked in between them and started drumming from the heart, he said. And these kids surrounded him. And one of them, named Nick Sandman, stood in his face. I'm sure you've all seen it. It has gone viral. And the media was extremely sympathetic to Nathan Phillips at the beginning. But now they say, since Mr. Sandman has spoken through a PR firm, Mitch McConnell's PR firm, and said, no, I was trying to diffuse the situation.
Mitch McConnell has a PR firm.
Yes, had one to help him get reelected, and now is speaking for this young man. He said, I was trying to diffuse the situation, and everyone sees him with a kind of grin, and all the people around him, many of these young white kids from Kentucky Catholic school, grinning, doing tomahawk chops. He said some were saying, build the wall, to a group of Native Americans. He wasn't sure what that meant. And how terrified he was, because he said, my song was coming to an end and I didn't know what would happen. Can you both respond to this as we all live in many different communities and what unites us and what you feel needs to be done today?
I'll attempt to address this. This feels really complicated to me because I feel like the big reason this became a news story is that the young people were wearing MAGA hats, right? And so some part of me wonders if folks wanted this to be a story because of the nature of what the MAGA hat represents. And so I think that might be part of it. And then I immediately go to, why was there an Indigenous march anyway? And I mean, we're all sitting on land that is stolen, right, from Native American people. And what is the debt that we owe to them still? Why? I mean, it's just a community that's just been decimated. I mean, there's so much genocide that has happened, and it's a really beautiful thing that when those cultures and traditions are able to survive. And then it's also linked, I mean, I think it's always important to mention this when it comes up, is that colonialism is also linked to the enforcing of the gender binary model. Indigenous cultures all over the world have third and fourth gender traditions. And then the colonists, the European colonists came in and said, what is this? We can't have this. This isn't a Christian. Two spirits in the Native American culture, Hydra in India, Philippines, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think about all that. And then the thing of safety. I think we all want to feel safe. I mean, Nathan had the impulse to try to bring some peace through his song, and that is the artist impulse, right? And then he immediately felt unsafe. And I think that is so much when we are traumatized, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. That is what happens in our nervous systems when we experience anything as a threat. And there's situations in my healing process around my traumas, I have to constantly ask myself, is the lack of safety I'm feeling, is it real? Or is it something that's a product of my own history? That's been part of my process. I mean, in this situation, I think it's very reasonable to think that he I think his feeling of not safe is very reasonable under the circumstances. I think it is what I see with that too, with the MAGA hat wearers, is that there is that kind of mentality and behavior is emboldened because of who is in the White House. I think white supremacists have come out of the woodwork and have felt so empowered in a way because of the white supremacists that we have in the White House. And so that is fascinating. And then as an actor, I'm always interested in getting into people's heads psychologically. What is going on with these children? What are they? And I think it could be their parents. It could be this feeling of like what it reminds me of the Kavanaugh hearings, where I felt like there were certain senators who sort of flexed, and they were like, it's about reasserting this system, the dog whistles don't work anymore, so now they're barking. And so it's this power play. It's so much about power. And I think some people do things because they don't feel safe, and they may have their own traumas they need to heal from. And sometimes I really had it reaffirmed. Sometimes people just want power, and they don't care how they get it. They don't care how corrupt they need to be to get it. And so I think that so much of the backlash that is happening around feminist issues, around race issues, are sometimes it's not hurt people. Sometimes it's that people want power and they want to keep it. And so with that reality in mind, how do we still love these people? How do we still elevate the narratives of the people who are most suffering? And how do it's a systemic thing that has to change. Hearts and minds are different. So the hearts and minds conversation is really about the media helps that, artists help that, and that is a change that happens within. And then we have the public policy piece. We need them both. We can't have the cultural shift alone, and we can't have the policy shift alone. I mean, Voting Rights Act.
So true. I completely agree with everything Laverne is saying, especially in terms of thinking about the First Nation people and us walking on their land. And I think about New York and the Lenape that were there before me, and every piece of ground, like having a consciousness that people were here before us. And I think in terms of even a country, and we always say, instead of gentrifying, Columbusing, right? Someone just discovered Bushwick, someone discovered Bed-Stuy. Like, no, people were living here before y'all got there. And I think the same for us in this land. There's a woman, Debbie Reese, who has a great blog for children's literature called American Indians in Children's Literature. And basically she'll review books that are really well written about the history of Indian, and then books that are just not good. And but she's very outspoken and is very information. I've just learned so much from her about the struggles of First Nation people. And I was saying earlier that looking at those pictures of those boys, there's the one of the Sandman kid sneering at Mr. Phillips, and then this whole other cachet of boys, and some of them are laughing, and then there's this one in the middle, and his face is kind of torn, right? He's looking like, okay, I'm kind of going along, I'm not sure what I'm going along with, and it's a very kind of Lord of the Flies feeling to the energy in that moment, and it made me sad. And my partner's always like, why aren't you angry? Why does it make you sad? And I think it makes me sad because I see them in this way that is just heartbreaking, that they're not, smart enough, not thoughtful enough, that there's not enough kindness in their family. Whatever the trauma is that makes them need to hurt somebody else is a thing that I want to fix. And I think literature, art, music, I think cinema, there's so many ways that people can be exposed to what they don't know. We talk about Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, who was a historian out of Ohio State University, and she was one of the first people to really start pushing multicultural children's literature. And she talked about the importance of kids needing both mirrors and windows in their literature. They needed mirrors to see reflections of themselves. You read a book and there's a trans kid in the book, there's a black kid in the book, there's a brown girl, there's a poor kid, a rich kid, a queer kid, and suddenly you see yourself out in the bigger world and part of something better or something greater. And you also need windows, so if you've never experienced something, you can go to a book and say, oh wow, I don't know what it means to be gay, but this kid is gay and I like him and we both play soccer or whatever. So it begins to create this empathy. And I think for so many people who don't have the access to other in this way, they just get smaller and smaller. And looking at those boys and looking at how big Nathan Phillips is in that moment, that he's strong enough to walk into that circle and say, I'm going to try to heal this. And those kids not knowing what to do with that except fight, is heartbreaking. And at the same time, because it's become has become so big in the media, I'm hoping that it's a step towards some other kind of shift. I think all of these shifts are happening in our society because people are speaking up and speaking out and calling people on their stuff, and that's the beginning of feeling uncomfortable, and the beginning of discomfort is the beginning of change.
Well, I want to thank you both so much, Jacqueline and Laverne, and to challenge everyone in this year, 2019, to go to where the silence is. For our online audience, please take a look at an exclusive profile of the visual artist Brendan B. Mike Odoms.
My entire being as an artist has been a process of responding. It was responding to space in New Orleans, responding to these abandoned and forgotten areas of the city. We had Katrina, oil spills, all these things were reasons why people could have constantly canceled us out. But the art and culture was always done as a response to that, to say this will not define us. So when you think about how that stuff happened, you think about the power and the beauty of art and the responsibility of art, and that's what New Orleans taught me. The cans that I create, which are these, basically I upcycle the spray cans that I use on my murals. I didn't like throwing away my spray cans. I felt like they were an instrument, and if you ask any musician if they would throw away their trumpet after performance, they'll be like, no. And so I felt like throwing away my cans was like throwing away my instrument. I like the idea that a wall is ephemeral, that it won't last forever. And then the can itself, I like the idea that it can last forever, that someone can put this on their desk, their mantle, and it could be preserved as a part of their collection or whatever. I think as an artist, I struggle with the idea of how do I live up to the legacy of the past and the responsibility that they left for us. And I feel like events like this kind of allow us to check ourselves and how can I use my art to increase this idea of healing, of human rights, and how can we be a constant vessel for that. I think it's our responsibility to create work that does exactly what the title of this event suggests. The art of using spray paint is still like this rebellious act in a way. So when I think about rebellion, I think about revolution. I think about people who use the idea to rebel for revolutionary reasons. And so I always put on my cans people who I feel embody that idea. And so the cans that I created for this particular experience are all similar spirited individuals. They're different champions of history that are exclusive to this particular moment. I hope that they become an exclamation point and remind people that they have work to do. My name is Brandon B. Mike Odoms. I'm a visual artist. I like to put a little paint where it ain't. That reminds us all to think. That's so corny.
Oh, there's so much beautiful artwork here on the Array Creative Campus. And right here with me, I have Brandon B. Mike Odoms from New Orleans. How does it feel to be here?
I'm super excited. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be around so many amazing people and to share in this creative energy.
National Day of Racial Healing. What did that mean to you, and how are you feeling about pushing that forward after today?
I mean, when I hear it, I hear a responsibility. I hear a call to action. It requires action. And I feel like as an artist, it's my job to use my art to do just that, to inspire people, to challenge people, to encourage people to know that we have work to do.
Yeah, it seems really ugly outside, but this is the time when artists really come to life. Definitely. Have you felt your artist friends and you yourself really shift in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think we have no choice. Nina Simone said it's the artist's duty to reflect the times.
Yes.
You know, so it's our job to be that mirror. And so whatever's happening in the outside world, we have to reflect that, but also show what's possible, to give hope that things don't have to be that way, that we can envision a brighter, beautiful day.
So you're looking at your art, you're connecting with your friends. How are you healing personally? What are you doing to change your everyday so that you can get through this in a sane manner? It's
Definitely.
Crazy out here.
Definitely. I mean, that's often the challenge. And I think we're blessed because we have the ability to have that vision to kind of not only just see the past as a lens for what tomorrow can be, but also to know that we can generate and bring in new tools and bring in new ideas that can hopefully help us get to that space that we're trying to go to. So for me, creating is that process of therapy. It is that process of just seeing how things should be, you know?
In your art today, what are the major themes that you're really focusing on?
I'm focusing on how the past informs us to create a better future. So I'm looking into the past, I'm looking into narratives of the past, people, champions of history, and allowing us to see that these aren't just isolated moments, but it's almost like a relay race, and the baton's been passed to us. So how do we take that and run with it?
That was a goosebump moment right there.
Yeah, so that's what I've been focusing on, to not just look at the past from this romanticized perspective, but to think about, okay, what are we doing now?
Right, if we don't look at the past, we're doomed to repeat it.
That's
which
how I say, yeah.
I think that's where we are. I think now we have Ava DuVernay and her team at Array partnered up with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to put together this beautiful day of truth, racial healing, and transformation. Kellogg stands true to those three principles in all of their work. So let's take a look back at their Racial Equality Initiative. Thank you so much, B. Mike.
Thank you.
I want to check out your art.
Fighting for our children, we shall not be moved. Fighting for our children, we shall not be moved.
For the first time, we are offering Native communities an opportunity to envision what can early childhood education look like.
These young people know that there are some very serious adults who care very deeply about them, and they're responding to that.
The Kellogg Foundation was created to improve the well-being of all children, and today we believe in the promise and potential of every child, and it is our mission to ensure that all children thrive.
Fighting for our children, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the water, we shall not be moved.
We are firmly committed to work that provides leadership and capacity so that people and communities can change their own lives.
The Sacred Little Ones Early Childhood Initiative is focused on strengthening early childhood education with Native families, Native communities.
You really can't make a difference just for children. It has to be for families as well.
We have embarked on a very long journey in which tribal colleges will be the leaders in re-envisioning and restoring the Native teachings about early childhood education, which includes the incorporation of their Native language, connections to their community, connections to the teachings that their elders bring to that process of their development in life. The family engagement work that we're doing also honors parents as children's first teachers. What we're trying to achieve in this initiative is to re-envision what early childhood education can be for Native families and Native children. The change needs to happen within our communities, and it needs to be sustained by our communities. So why not have a vision be created by our parents, our communities, our elders, our leaders?
The efforts of Sacred Little Ones have already made a difference, and they will continue to make a difference.
To provide greater and better opportunities for Native children.
Technology changes in rapid speed. Our structures that support children must also change in rapid speed.
This is Saturday morning. Y'all supposed to be asleep, watching some cartoons. How many of you guys have smartphones? You have the capacity to turn these things and use them not just as toys, but as tools to make a life for yourself, to solve any problem, to build businesses, and that's why we're here and proud to support you. Yes, we code.
Yes We Code is a national initiative to help train 100,000 what we call digitally disadvantaged young people to become world-class coders.
We see what they have, but we're gonna make it different. Yeah, but in like
that's up to you, it's your app.
This is the first time some of these young people have ever been told, you can be an uploader, not just a downloader. You can actually write the program. You don't just have to download it, you can create it, you can build it.
The theme is hacking education. And what we mean by that is we're asking the young people, if there's a problem that you see in the education system and you have a mobile app idea that you feel can solve that, we want to help you over the next 2 days to make that. They're going through the entire experience, ideation, problem solving, research, development, presentation. They're going through the whole spectrum within 2 days. So when they walk out of here, they know, I can do it.
Once you tell a young person they can build one thing, they start wanting to build the next thing and the next. They can build their own future coming out of here. And that's what America needs right now.
In 2013, there's 11 states where not one African-American child took the AP computer science exam. We know that 7 years from now, there's going to be over 1 million jobs in the tech sector that we can't fill. How in the world can a 15-year-old today be set up for that job at 22 when they go to a school where they don't even have a computer, let alone computer science classes?
The future is not being written in laws. It's being written in code. As these kids learn that language, that power language, they're going to be able to build a future that works for them and for all of us.
And this America Healing movement is just a piece of what we believe is necessary for this country to really marshal its resources so that all children thrive.
Fighting for our children, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the water, we shall not be moved.
Hi. Hello. Hi. I'm Rosanna Arquette. And I'm really proud to be here to stand with Kellogg and Array today. Thank you, Ava, for this extraordinary gathering of the tribes. It's just really powerful. I grew up around poetry, and my mother was a poet. And she took me to many poetry readings growing up, which turned into basically anti-war planning marches. And I'm really excited and delighted to introduce our next artist, who's truly a Renaissance woman. She's been called a poet who won't let you look away. And I'm such a fan of her work, and we're so lucky to have her read today. Please welcome Los Angeles Poet Laureate, Robin Coste Lewis. Oh, and
I'm also very moved. Thank you, Rosanna. That was beautiful. I'm also very, very moved to be here in this space with you all together. This space is, Array is like a church home for me. I deeply believe in the work that is being done here, so I can't tell you what a great thrill. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, Array. Thank you, Kellogg Foundation people. Thank you. Thank you so much. This, for those of you all who don't know, is Matthew Henson. Anybody know Matthew Henson? Yeah. For the people in the audience listening in, Matthew Henson was a 19th century African-American Arctic explorer. Orphaned as a child and lying about his age at 11 years old, he set sail as a cabin boy, traveling all around the world in the same ship for 6 years until he was 17. When he was 18, he became the assistant to the first Peary expedition to the Arctic. There were several that failed. Then, 23 years later, five Arctic expeditions later, where many of their crew died, where they were forced to eat their dogs to survive, where the frozen Arctic Sea would simply begin to move and open beneath them. Nevertheless, in 1908, Mr. Henson discovered the North Pole with U.S. Naval Commander Robert Peary. But history was not kind to Henson. That is, after their discovery, Commander Peary, a white man, enjoyed immense public national celebrations, while Mr. Henson spent the rest of his years relatively unknown, with very little acknowledgement and often destitute. The first time I read Henson's memoir, besides being completely awestruck, I thought the story a keen symbol of the history of the African diaspora. Our migrations north mirrored Henson's expedition to the pole. Of course, his story is also a poignant metaphor for our own individual, private expeditions, as David spoke so movingly about with regard to love. His story is also a great metaphor for the history of all human migrations, and particularly the plight of indigenous peoples worldwide. So today I wrote 2 poems for you, short poems, don't worry, and a third that I'm also going to include in honor of Henson, Arctic exploration, African American world exploration, which is something we don't talk enough about, all the African American explorers who have made our world possible, as well as a poem about an ancient story of human history. The images behind me that I will be screening for you are of my family, who several decades ago migrated here from Louisiana to Los Angeles, our own hot North Pole. I found the photographs under my grandmother's bed after she died. For this reason, I have not retouched any of the pictures because I wanted you to consider the damage of the photographs as yet another example of American history. I just want to use this moment for you guys to read this slide so we can kind of clear your palate. The seventh meridian. At my back lay a land of sadness. Day and night were the same tide. The moon rose midday. The sun rose at midnight. Conditions were never similar. No 2 days were the same. Imagine gorgeous bleakness, beautiful blankness, the magnificent desolation about us, snow blindness, battle harbor, morning star. We took a chance. We started on April 1st, 1895 with 3 sledges and 37 dogs. We reached Anniversary Lodge on June 25th with 2 sledges and only 1 dog. My sledge split. I've practically built 1 sledge out of 2 broken ones. There is no more beyond. We went to sleep with our boots on. Clear, no wind, temperature 57 below 0. Stay aboard, my soul companion. Stay aboard. We built temporary houses. The boxes of our provisions themselves formed the walls. The roofing was made from makeshifts such as sails, overturned whaleboats, rocks. We had every experience except death. More than once, we looked death squarely in the face. Now and then, a moon. Elevation, headlands, wind-swept plains, ice-covered waters, life-giving sea. Every atom a finite piece of another star, what remains from preceding galaxies. Our ever-victorious willingness. We utilized the trail made by the preceding parties. We marched and marched onward. We forced our way. I'm sure we covered the necessary distance to ensure our arrival at the top of the earth. The whole party together farther north than had ever been made by any other human beings. As we looked at each other, we realized our position, and we knew, without speaking, that our time had come. The din of whistles, bells, alert attention, intelligence, sagacity. We gave each other the strong fraternal grip of our honored fraternity. We confidently expected to see each other again. I felt all that it was possible for me to feel. We are at Cape Good Point. The night is coming quickly, but I have started for a place. I do not intend to run back to get a better start. Before the land broke into countless pieces, before knowledge's irresistible urge, before the last 5 great mass extinctions, when time's mother was just a little girl. Before was is, when we were just one cell, sensitive to light. Before the retina or the pupil, before the desire to see you walk across a field. Before the first kiss, before light and luck, before bird-hipped women, before the evolution of the wing, before the birth of stars, their bright black afterglow, before transition and impact, when the beginning was the end, when the future was our only land and the world had just begun to whisper to me. And before that exquisite moment when you sit there unaware of me watching you, just then, right before you look up. Our country is called history. Our capital is named memory. Navel. We crawled out of her navel one by one, then waited until we were all here. That lucid moment when the last wet child learned to stand. We began walking. We walked slowly. We took some time. We took more than that. When we began to grow hungry, some offered to turn themselves into animals. Smiling, they said, "Here, eat me." Others turned into water, rivers, trees. Some turned themselves to dirt so we could walk a path. We crept toward the edges, clawed and crawled to the top of the world, and there we clung. Instead of a mouth, a woman spoke through the vibrant beak of a yellow bill. Sometimes we visited the man on the moon. Sometimes he let us inside his house. Sometimes his transparent, hollow wife would dance. Later, when people asked us, "Where did you come from?" we could only answer, "Water." A whole language comprised of just one word. We walked onto the water. We built houses on the water. We had babies on the water. We sewed clothes made of water with needles made of ice. The night, so constant, changed us. The planets taught us a vocabulary without any alphabet. The trees began to walk at night. The ocean glowed green from underneath. Our roofs were made of well ribs. Our lamps were stone that burned clear oil. And now I've turned my face into this word so we could sit here together again.
It's very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin and Terrence, for that incredible collaboration. You have blessed us. Now, the National Day of Racial Healing isn't the only unifying event going on. There are so many programs happening in the States, including the 4th annual MLK Now event that took place in New York City yesterday. The powerful event created by Blackout for Human Rights, featuring Ryan Coogler, Common, and many more. Now, we definitely want you all at home tweeting about today's big event. I was wrong before. It's #HowWeHeal. #HowWeHeal. And later on in the live stream, I'm going to check in with some of our guests right here at the Array Creative Campus to find out their online reactions so we can share what's going on in this online space. We're going to shift gears and get to know some of the artists behind the beautiful work you see all over this beautiful place. Let's take a look.
Mi nombre es Omar García, mejor conocido como Angurria. Vengo desde la República Dominicana, una pequeñita isla, media isla del Caribe. Contento de estar aquí con ustedes y aquí estamos trabajando. Bueno, no tengo palabras para explicar lo honrado y lo feliz y lo agradecido que estoy de ser artistas del Caribe, de una pequeña media isla del Caribe, y que ustedes hayan seleccionado mi trabajo para hacer esta parte tan representativa en una ciudad tan importante y con un evento de tanta importancia donde lo que tú estás promoviendo algo tan positivo. Es una pregunta que me han hecho mucho de por qué nunca utilizo los colores reales en las mujeres, aparte de que por qué hacerlo literal. Vamos a darle un giro. Pero para ser sincero, prefiero mejor que no me encasillen en X etnia o X tipo de persona. Al momento de yo colocarla en rojo o en azul, puede ser cualquier persona, puede ser cualquier color de piel, puede ser cualquier etnia. Y eso es lo importante, el hecho de que queda abierto, cualquier persona se puede sentir identificada en eso y no sencillamente, nunca utilizo los colores reales, pero también me encanta resaltar esa pasión, ese furor, esa calidez que nosotros tenemos en el Caribe a través de los colores. Yo creé un hashtag para venir para acá que se llama From LA to LA. Yo vengo de un barrio en República Dominicana que se llama Los Alcarrizos. Las iniciales son LA y Los Ángeles. Siempre ha sido un sueño viajar a esta ciudad, conocerla. Siempre he visto también el arte urbano que viene de la costa oeste. Nunca había estado en la costa oeste. Y me parece maravilloso el hecho de que mi primera vez en Los Ángeles sea pintando murales. Y ustedes no se imaginan lo importante y lo grande que es para mí y para cualquiera de la comunidad dominicana el hecho de que yo pueda estar aquí representando mi país, mi cultura, en una ciudad tan importante como Los Ángeles. No importa el tiempo que me tome, pero aquí estamos, desde Los Alcarrizos a Los Ángeles.
I grew up in Seattle. I started writing graffiti when I was 12 years old. I am a full-blooded Native American Indian. I'm half Haida from Alaska and half Apache. And when I can, I try to tell my personal story visually by painting. When I was first presented with this opportunity, I really liked the idea of healing, and that resonated with me really deep. So I prayed about what the healing symbol would be for Native American people, and I came up with eagles. Just to see an eagle is always a symbol of hope. For me, when I do art, bigger is better, and I would like to paint on buildings, you know, the size of skyscrapers, to be real. It seems like the larger I paint my images, the more profound the Native American image becomes, especially in the public eye. By me continuing to do Native American imagery, it shows people in the community that the Native American people weren't defeated and they weren't suppressed, and that, you know, the culture is still alive and healthy. Being a part of the National Day of Healing means healing the Native American spirit and healing the Native American soul. Most of the community is still rebuilding. When the community is broken, a part of me is broken. When the community heals, part of me heals. Part of it is me feeling like there's a bigger picture more than me, and that, you know, different communities that all have the same obstacles can come together on a day like this. I'm Andrew Morrison. I'm Apache and Haida, Native American heritage, and I paint for a living.
That was a look at two of the artists that gave their amazing art and their hearts to this place right here. Hi, Andrew, and this is Anguria. Hey, tell me what it means for you to have your art here on this campus.
You know, what it means for me is to be included in the program, and as a Native American person, that the Native American identity is standing side by side with these communities of color and indigenous people that are, you know, wanting to heal. That's a big part of being Native American, you know.
It's about the representation, isn't
Yeah.
it? Reflection. Anguria, hello. I know you have your translator here. We're standing right in front of this huge mural that you have been painting for the last couple of days. Tell me what this means to you, especially on a day like today, the National Day of Healing.
Bueno, aparte de lo honrado que me siento de estar aquí plasmando esta pieza en un evento tan importante, de tanta inclusión y tan positivo como es este aquí.
I feel so honored to be here. It's so important what you're doing here. So important for all of us that are Native, that are Hispanic people. So I'm really honored to be here.
I mean, can you look at his painting? It's emotional, isn't it?
Yeah, I was looking at it. It's unbelievable.
He gives you a thumbs up, Anguria.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Thank you so much. What do you want to see the guests to feel when they see your work in particular?
You know, when anybody looks at my artwork, I really wish that they would feel the Native American spirit. My family's from Arizona and Alaska. They're Apache and Haida. So, you know, as a person of color, you know, we stand side by side with everybody here, and that's what I would really like, you know.
That's what it's all about, unity. Andrew and Guria, thank you so much for contributing to this absolutely phenomenal day. Thank you to continue to do your work, and we will embrace it with all of our hearts.
Thank you.
Much love.
Thank you.
Now we're going to showcase a powerful musical performance that was recorded at the Legacy Museum's Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. Here's Andrew Day performing the Nina Simone classic, Strange Fruit.
Southern trees, bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves, and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar tree. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and a twisted mouth. Scent of magnolia, sweet bear fruit for the crows to plow, for the rain to gather, for the wind to sow, for the sun to rise, for the tree to dry. Here is, here is, here is, here is, here is. Here is a stranger, bitter, bitter
Yes, she better sing. That was Andra Day with a special Strange Fruit performance at the Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. And we're all going to take a deep breath after that. Now I'm here with some of the leadership of Time's Up, Nina Shaw, Katie McGrath, and Maha Dakil. Give it up for these ladies, because they are killing it. This is what I want to know. It's such an interesting time right now. You guys created this a year ago. How do you feel things are going a year later?
Well, there are 3 of us standing here, but there are hundreds of women who have been part of this over the last year. And the very beginning, sprung from Tarana Burke 12 years ago, who, coined the Me Too phrase that became a home base for so many women. And as the women who bravely came forward around Harvey Weinstein presented themselves, we had an opportunity to support them, and through the last year we've been gathered together to really work on issues that will guarantee safety and equity in the workplace for women of all kinds.
We had a really interesting discussion earlier with David Oyelowo as well as Eva Longoria and a couple other people. He brought up the point about this is going to be a sale end date or whatever if we don't do something to get the men involved. What were your thoughts on that? I know Nina has something to say on that as well. Maha, I'm going to let you go first.
I think what's important is that when we've said it to ourselves, that has been a fear since the second we all galvanized, is that we don't want this to be a moment. We want this to be a movement, that you're not allowed to be bored by our desire to have equal rights, that it's a human rights problem, not a women's rights problem. So I think David, speaking as an ally himself, meaning it's a fear of his own, is helpful in acknowledging that if he has that fear, that he as an ally and other men will hopefully work towards joining us and making sure such a thing doesn't happen. I don't think it's possible for the women's movement to go backwards, and we do share half the population. So correct. I don't know that a sell-by date is really possible. I think the genie's out of the bottle. However, involving men and including men, I think is key. We share a planet together. Like I said, it's a human rights issue. And I think men should also step up and volunteer and show how they want to be involved, whether it's Time's Up or Me Too, or just as fathers, employers, brothers, how they deport themselves in their lives every day is showing up for the movement of equal rights.
Is it vital that we mother them through the process of getting there? Nina?
Well, I don't personally agree that they need to be mothered or that they want to be mothered. But this is a civil rights movement. And at the end of the day, the people who are asserting their rights, their God-given right, can't be told that there is an expiration on those rights. The truth of it is that if there's an expiration, that expiration hurts all of us.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing that our male allies realize. And I don't want this to be entirely about our male allies, because this has always been about us taking control.
Because then we center it around men again, right? Which is the problem.
And Time's Up is not centered around men. Time's Up is centered around intersectionality. It's about all of us together asserting the fact that we have not been recognized for who we are and what we contribute, and that we're not going to take it anymore.
Right. And what I love is that you guys, the three of you standing here, represent intersectionality, women from diverse backgrounds who are together with this hashtag Time's Up movement, which isn't going anywhere. Thank you so much. I so much appreciate your time. And onward, right, ladies? We're going to toss it to another artist package. This is Allison Tenati.
Great. I'm human, and I'm an artist from Oakland, California. Growing up near Oakland, I was always into graffiti as a kid, but I always had the idea that it was a male thing. It was really when I moved to LA and I started noticing a lot of women on the walls. I was luckily able to immerse myself in the LA art scene and just get to know people who were doing exactly what I wanted to be getting into in the future. I really love Array's mission in sharing stories about diversity and underrepresented populations. And so I wanted to create a piece that really spoke to young women as sort of an aspirational piece. The fact that the campus is in historic Filipino town in LA, I'm a Filipino woman. What I ended up coming up with was a young woman holding a scepter with her head bound down in like reverence with the words rise. And since this piece is going to be revealed at the National Day of Racial Healing, I specifically put the words rise at ground level so that it hits everyone that walks by it, you know, like, because then you need somewhere to rise from, right? So I wanted to start from the bottom to the top, and I wanted to just make sure that everyone saw it. I'm actually more comfortable painting walls than I am painting canvases. When I create my murals, so much of the work is done beforehand. So by the time I get to the wall, I'm basically like a human printer. I totally believe that art can influence racial healing. I totally feel that art can create conversations, and hopefully that's what my art does. A lot of art can be used to critique. I wanted more to encourage than anything because I think we all need a break sometimes. And so I wanted also my pieces to be meditative. I have my message about a young queen rising to the occasion. That's what this mural is about. At the end of the day, I do just want people to appreciate it as a beautiful work of art. I'm human, and I'm an artist from Oakland, California.
I'm standing here with Allison Tenati, also known as Human, and I love that name. You're one of the featured muralists. Why was it so important for you to take part today?
Just being here on the Array campus, Ava is such a huge role model for me, and especially we both went to UCLA. Right. We both are women in our fields that tend to be male dominated, and so I really love looking up to her and seeing her break through barriers. And so and especially what Array does here, you know, just helping distribution for underrepresented stories and underrepresented communities. So it was as soon as they asked me, it was an honor. So of course I'm happy to be here.
Tell me what you want people to gather from your art. What messages do you want them to take away?
Well, I've been working on this series where I've been incorporating text into my murals. So for the last year or so, I've been inserting text that promotes positive growth. So one of my more well-known murals in LA says bloom, and then I've done evolve, shine. Here on the campus I did rise, because you know, we're really living in a divisive time right now, and there are so many incredible artists that are doing really great work, touching upon really important topics. But for me, I want to be able to create art that heals and something that you can meditate on and have it be a bit of an escape. And so I want, when people see my work, I don't want them to be bombarded with you know, like the ads we see every day. We're constantly bombarded with all sorts of messages.
Called distractions.
Distractions, yes. So when people see, especially my text-based work, I want them to, I don't know, have something that will push them along in the day and in their life.
Don't forget to rise, people. Thank you so much, Human.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you're fantastic. Now Array has opened their creative campus to showcase all of the stunning artwork, and people are mingling and moving about. That's the noise you hear. It's an incredible event, but that's certainly not all that's going on inside this creative collaborative. Since 2010, Array has been a leader in independent film distribution for people of color, as you were just talking about, and women from around the world. The collective has distributed 20 films in 9 years, woo-woo to that, and are not slowing down anytime soon. Here's a look at Array's work. That was a great segue.
Now we built a 3-building campus that will be opening in the summer.
I'm Andrew Morrison. I'm Apache and Haida, Native American heritage. And what inspires me, what I paint when I paint is people.
I'm Human, and I'm an artist from Oakland, California. I'm a Filipino woman. The fact that the campus is in historic Filipino town in LA, so I really liked that connection right there.
We just moved into this beautiful campus. It's wonderful to come here. It's joyous. We love it.
When we say cool, it just means an array of people. That's why we named it Array. Different kinds of people. It's progression, and so, but the idea that our work is not considered in relation to something else is one of the ideas of Array. So this is Array tonight, Array at the Broad. We're supporting each other, and that's incredible for me to hear, an honor and an awe whenever I'm in your presence.
Definitely be, true and genuine to your story, because your story deserves to be told.
We really care about each and every one of you all having a beautiful experience and really understanding our industry. Because this industry is going to die if you don't join us, if we don't have people like you, energy like you. We have distributed 18 films by hand with blood, sweat, and tears. Just grassroots initiative to put these films out around the country, around the world.
Okay, let's go to arraynow.com to find out more about Array's films. With me now, I have Gabriel Cordell, the star and producer of the Array film, Roll With Me, and activist Jewel Thais Williams, who is the owner of America's oldest Black-owned disco club and the inspiration behind the Array film, Jewel's Catch One. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. What does it feel like to be here today, Gabriel?
Just absolutely inspiring. I knew a little bit of the history, and yesterday I got to watch a few hours, and I was emotional wreck. And just being here today made me feel alive, and just grateful to be in this room with all these people who are just open and compassionate and understanding and accepting.
Yes. Isn't that what we want for all of our futures? We need to really unite and come together. Jewel, Catch One is a movie by Array is distributing it. Tell me what it means to you to have that sort of diversity out in the world.
Well, it was like another coming out for me. Very cathartic, very freeing. And what I wanted for the film to be, and talking to folks in various countries as well as here during the film festivals, I found out that it was achieving that for a lot of people, and that was for them to know that people like us exist, and we can do things to make the world a better place. We can show up and be ourselves. We can be real now. That wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
And that whatever you want, it's never too late for.
I love that. Can we just love on Ava for a little bit? Because
Yeah. I
she
love
is
that
killing
woman.
this genre of just putting marginalized communities
Yes.
out there and making it sort of normalized. What do you like to say to Ava? You can just give her some love right now.
Well, first of all, Ava, what you've done just in your personal life and your professional life is just extraordinary and it's so inspiring. And the fact that you gave my little film an opportunity to be seen by the masses, I am gratefully, eternally grateful for you, and I just appreciate you for being you. I
Yeah,
love you.
You guys are forever part of the Array family. What does that mean to you?
Oh, wow. I told Ava earlier today how proud I am of her.
Yeah.
And to be an elder in various communities, African American, gay and lesbian, etc., to have one of our children doing so well and bringing to the world, just opening up. I saw 13, you know, amazing. I saw One Wrinkle in Time, amazing. Selma, amazing. And for a young lady like her to step out in faith and do all these wonderful things for all of us.
Yes, ma'am. I remember being at her first film, and to see it explode to this has been phenomenal.
Wow.
Let's take a look at their movies trailers. Check this out.
The Catch offered a place where any and everybody could come. The guys used to talk always about going out and catching one. That meant that they were going to go out on the prowl and try to pick somebody up, and that's how the name Catch One came into being. The Catch was important because at the time that we opened, there was still an abundance of racism.
They tried to burn her out when they tried to buy her out, but Jewel is my hero.
Not only was she poor, not only was she a woman, she was a lesbian, and on top of that, a black woman.
People of different lifestyles were actually ordinance against activities of same-sex dancing, of dressing in transgender clothes.
The Catch One became a haven.
I became a paraplegic and I can't feel from my chest down. By the time I was in my 30s, addict, using coke and crystal meth. If I didn't do something soon, I was gonna die.
Anyone who's gonna be a first to do anything, I'm instantly interested.
We have to deal constantly with the stress and pressure of changing roads and conditions, the uncertainty of the drivers behind us.
This experience showed me the limitless potential of humanity. It helped me find my purpose and gave me the courage to continue to roll.
I am Storm Reed, and our next performance is a fierce troupe of ladies who have over 50 million views on YouTube for their electrifying viral videos. And, I mean, this is kind of a big deal. They've been co-signed by the legendary Debbie Allen herself, and I'm a big fan of Queen Bee, yes, Beyonce, just to name a few. Through their social efforts and giving voice to lady hoofers everywhere, this ensemble celebrates humanity and the strength of womanhood. Please welcome Syncopated Ladies.
love, banking, hugs, laughs, and the power of being. Granddaughter of prideful grandparents who were rebels before it was common, woke before it was a catchphrase.
My movement tells you who I am. I'm no longer afraid to use my voice to rock my fro. I'm going back to Africa, not because you asked me to, but because it's where I'm from, where you're from.
I throw your colorism back in your face. I am not your fetish to be uncolored to make you comfortable. I am not your exotic fruit waiting to be picked from the branches of ignorance that deny me of my beautiful Africanness.
Ivy League trained, life educated. I'm Sandra Bland in a loading zone in Jones, loaded with ideas that choke black women. But I won't choke in the face of ideas that don't honor the best of me.
I aspire to inspire, empower, and uplift girls who dance through any hood in America, making it great in ways it's never been. I'm no longer waiting in your lines for admittance. I'm drawing the line.
I am gumbo served hot. My resilience and regal grace dance circles around your ears.
Spirit flows through these feet, grounding me and turning.
My joy comes from a place that is unbothered. I earned my way. I fought my way. I carved out my place with these feet of mine.
Oh, my belief is stronger than the fears that you project. Where I'm from, our rhythm's healing with love and respect. Where I'm from, we leveled up before you lifted the level. Where I'm from, you will know our names and the names of our people. I'm from. We stand tall in unity, belief in what we dream to be. We stand tall in unity, belief in what we dream to be. Come on, we stand tall in unity, belief in what we dream to be. Come on, we stand tall in unity, belief in what we dream to be. We stand tall in unity, belief in what we dream to be. We stand tall in unity, belief in what we dream to be.
Give it up one more time for Syncopated Ladies. Woo! That was beautiful. Thank you, ladies. My name is Ashley Mui, and I'm one of the curators for today's incredible festivities. Thank you all for being here. This evening, after the live stream, our in-studio guests will enjoy a beautiful arrangement of food by some of the most colorful and dynamic chefs in the culinary industry. We will have a special moment to commune and break bread together. And right now, we have an opportunity to speak to all of our chefs. We have Chef Preeti. Hi. We have Chef Naisha Arrington. We have Chef George Azar. And we have Chef Dalia Narvaez. Thank you. So first, I'll start with our native Bay Area chef, Chef Preeti. We noticed some tweets going out recently. And you shared about the way society values some cultures' cuisine more than others.
Yeah.
Can you explain what you've been noticing and why you think this is happening?
I think that, obviously today in our world, the chef has become a celebrity in their own right. And there's still this idea of what a real chef is, right? You hear this term, a real chef, and everyone thinks this, white guy with a goatee and tattoos and what have you. And it reminds me of, I went to culinary school in 2002, and this French chef was teaching us to make a fricassee. And I was watching the whole method, and I was like, oh, it's a French chicken curry. And he was so offended that I said that. And I just sort of, in the moment, moved on. But I just thought to myself, well, it's the same thing. We're like cooking this chicken. We're braising it with different aromatics. This is rosemary and garlic. I would use, cardamom and cumin and green chilies. But it's the same process. And so I think that there's a way in which we talk about mainly European cuisines, and we sort of elevate them in this way. And yet, when we talk about cuisines from other cultures, whether that be Indian, Mexican, all kinds of Asian, Latin American, et cetera, we tend to put them in this box. It's this very, it's authentic, it's this rough and tumble dive, this hole in the wall, and that is the only thing that is sort of, exalted within non-European cuisines. And I think that there's a way that we talk about things that we could change how we value all of those cuisines, because, I think about the cuisines of China and India, just thousands of years of history and such complicated recipes and such complicated techniques, and yet we sort of devalue them as to this, $7.99 buffet. So I think that there's just a lot of work that we all need to do in how we celebrate all cultures and put them on the same level.
Thank you so much, Chef. Chef Naisha, you're an advocate of sustainable cooking. Can you tell us what that is and why you think it's a necessary component to this conversation we're having around racial healing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I have modeled my life after in the food world, but also just being sustainable and having a sort of a full circle and idea of everything that I approach. And I just adore what you said. I mean, it's so exciting to see the food of the home also coming to the forefront and not just being family meal or just, it's out there and it's being celebrated. I come from a biracial background, Korean, African American, and I've come up in the French kitchens and classically French trained 3-star, 2-star, 1-star Michelin restaurants my entire career. My restaurant's called Native. I'm a native Angelino, and my restaurant's in Santa Monica. And there, my cooks and myself go to the farmers market every single week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, and we choose what the menu's going to be based off of what the farmers are excited about, So I've built relationships with them over the last 16 years of my professional career, and now I just go and they're like, we're stoked about this crooked neck squash or things that you might not see in a store or what have you, and it's on the menu the next week, and or the next, few days. And inciting that passion within my team is what I live for, because I've had mentors who had the same perspective on cooking. It's not just this term, sustainable cooking. It's an actual lifestyle. It's celebrating Mother Nature and, building this sort of ripple and a wave of thought to affect change. And it's for the farm workers, it's for humanity, it's for everything. So I'm here to do my part as a chef, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's very passionate about planet Earth and people in my restaurant, and planting the seeds of growth within my cooks first, and also people who come eat at my restaurant. So
awesome, thank you, Chef. And then we have Chef George. So you are of Palestinian heritage.
Yes.
And you're from Detroit?
What
What up, though? What up, though?
Some familiar faces.
So tell us when you were first introduced to Vietnamese food.
Actually, in her neck of the woods in the Bay Area.
Oh, right on.
I used to go, my aunt used to work for Joie de Vivre hotels when it first opened. So she would trade hotel rooms to fly me out to San Francisco. And there's a spot in the Tenderloin where they were pulling crab out of the tank, and salt and pepper crab, and that's one of the first memories. I didn't even know at the time either, because I was 8 or 9. Not until I grew older that I realized I already had Vietnamese before I was introduced to it.
Awesome. And so what inspired you to open up your own Vietnamese restaurant in your hometown?
I want to be in my hood. I don't know. I don't know. But I cook where I'm the most confident already anyway. So it's it's a hard question to answer, because to me it's a normal. I didn't think about the choosing to do it there. It just was why wouldn't I? Why Vietnamese food? I wanted to make it. I came back, I would go back and forth, working, school, whatever, to different countries, cities. But everywhere had Vietnamese food at my fingertips, except when I would go back home. And so one day I was just mad, yo, I'm about to just make it myself. So that's really how it happened.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
And Chef Dahlia, you are breaking barriers as one of the top executive pastry chefs in the U.S. as a woman and a Latina. Tell us a little bit about your rise to this status and why you think it's vital to diversify this kind of top level in the industry.
Well, I think when I started, I wasn't really sure what I was doing. Going to college didn't really speak to me, and so I enjoyed cooking because I was the oldest of three, so I had to help my mom out at home. And I thought, well, I really enjoy doing this. I should try to do it professionally. Cooking and I just kind of found each other. And it was just a matter of showing up early, staying later, and just really working. Like, I didn't go to culinary school. And I think that's what really, got me to where I am. I work really hard, and I expect that from my staff. Why do I think it's important to have diversity in an executive level? I think because you have to remember that, especially in my industry, you work with people. You work with people with different backgrounds, different upbringings. They have families, and I think it's just important to remember that every day.
Awesome. Thank you, chefs. We look forward to tasting some of your stuff later on tonight. Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. My name is Omar Dorsey, and man, what a beautiful day, right? Beautiful food, beautiful conversations, discussions, the activations, the performances. Man, I'm full right now. I am certainly full. As an actor on the greatest show of all time, Queen Sugar, and a native Georgian, I am extremely honored to introduce the third and final conversation on diversity and democracy. Our first guest is the first black woman candidate to gain major U.S. nomination for the governor of Georgia in 2018. In the face of opposition the entire way, many times ugly, most of the time petty, the woman never backed down. She's a leader and a hero. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome the 2018 Democratic nominee for the governor of the state of Georgia, Stacey Abrams. And alongside her, the curator of the entire day, the greatest boss on planet Earth, the multifaceted, multi-talented founder of Array, Ava DuVernay.
Welcome to California.
Thank you. It's so much warmer here.
Yes.
And that's saying something from the South.
That's word. And thank you for coming to Array.
Thank you.
And to this day. We've talked on the phone. I've had the occasion to be in touch with you through your campaign, but never to meet you in person, and your presence invigorates me.
Thank you.
Because you mean so much to me. I see what I want to be in you in terms of a warrior in the truest sense. And so I want to talk a little bit about that warrior spirit so that I can get a little some, and then we could share it with people. And so I'd love to start from the beginning as far as talking about your love for the state of Georgia. What is it about the people, that place, that led you to want to serve in the way that you sought? And how did they respond to you in ways that warmed your heart and kept you going?
Well, I first have to say thank you. You were one of the strongest advocates for our campaign. You helped in quiet ways that I didn't know about until the end. But more than anything, you saw the potential of what we were doing. And so thank you so much for that and for having me here.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you to Omar, because Omar's part of the conversation about why Georgia. I'm originally from Mississippi. My family is from Hattiesburg. I grew up on the coast. My parents were civil rights activists when they were teenagers. My dad went to jail trying to register people to vote when he was 15 or 16, a right he wouldn't have for nearly another decade. And they raised me to understand that we were of the South. And what that meant is that we had opportunities that were sometimes denied because of race, because of poverty, but that we had a spirit and an obligation to fight not only for ourselves, but for those around us, especially those who'd given up hope or who never had it. When my parents were 40 years old, they decided to become United Methodist ministers. They were both called into the ministry, so decided might be a strong word. They were called into the ministry and decided to make our relative poverty in Mississippi permanent. And so they were both admitted to Emory University, and that moved us from Mississippi to Georgia. And I loved Atlanta, in part because they had more than one mall. That was awesome. But the more time I spent there as a student in high school, which is where I met Omar, we went to the same high school, and then I went to Spelman College. I loved what Georgia meant. It was a perfect blend of where I'd grown up, but also the places I thought I might want to live. It was New York without being cold. It was opportunity, and it was a place where you didn't have to be from there to be of there. And that's what I love about Georgia. It's what led me to be in politics, because I also saw the potential for that state. Because as much as you have the shining light that can be Atlanta, you go around one corner or another and you find poverty and lack and want and despair, and you can find that across the state, but you also find a resilience that has to be celebrated, but it also needs warriors. It needs people who are willing to take up the armor and fight so that no one has to despair. I think poverty is immoral. I think it is economically inefficient. I think it's a waste of human capital. And as someone who is wed to the South by my spirit, I believe that if you can get Georgia to the place where I know it can be, you can change the South. And if you change the South, you change America, and that's my mission.
Okay, so that brings us to your love of Georgia. We understand how you got there and the place where you stood. The governorship, though, because nobody had done that before. So what's making you think you can pull this off?
I didn't know any better. No, look, my dad used to tell us, it's like, you don't tell yourself no. Let other people do that. And I've always understood that the federal government has been an ally of the people, it used to be. I know it's been a long time since we've seen it, at least 2 years. But for people of color, in particular in the South, the federal government had always been the savior. Because most of the laws that oppress our people are not federal laws, they're state laws. Welfare, the erosion of the social safety net didn't start at the federal level. It wasn't Bill Clinton. It was Tommy Thompson, the governor of Wisconsin. Mass incarceration started right here in California under Ronald Reagan when he was governor. Stand your ground started with Jeb Bush when he was governor of Florida. And Jim Crow never had a single federal law. So if you understand that, the power to not just fix what's broken, but to make things new and right sits in the governor's office. And you have to have someone in that office who wants to use that power to make the world better. And so for me, as I went through my adulthood, I was an entrepreneur, I was a civic leader, I was a state legislator, but the space that was never occupied by people who shared my values and had the time and the attention to the issues that matter to me was the governor's office. And so I did what I could to help other people get there, and when they didn't do it, I did it myself.
Got it. So I'm good. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a question that I've been dying to ask as this began, because sitting in California, it felt going in that there were chips stacked against you from the beginning. We know the woman thing, we know the black thing, but also that thing of the person overseeing the elections also running. And so I was interested in, early on, how did you frame that for yourself in terms of going into war with someone who had a whole different set of weapons and resources in terms of his very office that you didn't have? What was the thought about how you should and could proceed?
You might say I was trying to overcome a wall of problems. Yeah, see, you got it. There you go. Look, part of my legacy of growing up in the Deep South is that everything is stacked against you often. There are systemic challenges that are baked into the DNA of where we come from and how we access power and even access the basics of the right to vote. For me, working on voting didn't start with my campaign. It started a long time ago. I registered voters when I was in college, and I worked on civic engagement because I've always understood that it's like telling someone you can drive anywhere you want, but they never teach you how to drive and they never give you a car. And so I've always wanted to make sure that at least people knew how to drive. And so a few years ago, starting in 2014, I started an organization to get people registered to vote. 800,000 people of color in Georgia were not registered to vote in 2014. That's the population of South Dakota. And so my first job was to make sure they were registered. We've registered more than 300,000 of them over the course of the last few years. And so part of what I thought about when we started this campaign was that you had to think about the barriers that were being erected against me, but also think about how do you overcome them. And you can't always overcome something by undoing what they've done. Sometimes you just have to find a battering ram big enough to break through it. And so for me, that was enlarging the electorate. From the very beginning of my campaign in the primary, I took a lot of heat from people who were very confused about why I kept talking about people of color, because you weren't supposed to do that. And what I would say is I'm not excluding the white community, but I am centering the communities that are often left out of the conversation. If we want to expand the electorate, you don't expand something by bringing over people who do not want you to get what you're looking for. You expand the electorate by finding the people who don't believe they have power and letting them know they do. It's like, if you've watched any of the X-Men movie, it's like making sure that mutants know that they have powers. And in this case, it's making certain that communities of color, that poor communities, that rural communities understood that if they voted, they could overcome the barriers. The problem for me was I worked as hard as I could. We did things that were transformative. But sometimes you cannot beat a bad call, especially when your opponent is the referee, the contestant, and the scorekeeper. And so, I mean, if you watch football, you may have seen the bad call against the Saints. Oh no, I'm not trying to start anything. Look, the Rams are welcome to Georgia. Come on. But my point is, when there is a bad call and when everyone knows it's a bad call, but you're impotent to stop it because the rules don't allow you to fix it. The Constitution of Georgia said he was okay. The Constitution allowed him to do that. The laws of Georgia allowed him to deny the right to vote to hundreds of thousands of people because he bastardized rules that existed and he manipulated them for his end and thereby eroded democracy. So the answer to your question is, I don't know how not to do this. I don't know how not to try things that haven't been tried before, because often for people in my community, that's the only way things ever get done. And my parents raised me to be very intentional, but also very relentless. And the reality is you may not break through barriers the first time you try, but we made a big enough hole that they're not going to be able to rebuild it again.
So share with us, you do all of this groundwork, you have transformative actions that rally people on the ground in Georgia in ways that they hadn't before, centering people who had been outside of this space in terms of folks that had not voted before, disenfranchised communities. They come out, they vote. They're standing in spaces where there's not proper heat, where they are being left outside, where they are being turned away, issues with identification. All of the tricks are played, and yet people stood there, they vote twice, some people are coming back, and they do it, and some people say it didn't work. What do you say to those people? Because in the end, you're not in the place that they pushed for you to be. How do you keep us going in that place?
One of the most heartening moments in the aftermath of the most difficult election I have ever endured is the fact that I cannot walk down the street. I literally can't go to the bathroom at the airport without someone telling me they know we won. And here's why that matters. Because sometimes it's a passenger on the plane, and sometimes it's the person who cleans the plane. And what we were able to do with this campaign is make certain people, one, understood their power, two, use that power, and three, they're angry because they are not going to let someone steal their power. He gets to borrow it for 4 years, but he doesn't get to steal it. Here's what we accomplished in this campaign. In 2014, 1.1 million people voted total on the Democratic side of the aisle. We turned out 1.2 million African Americans on our side of the aisle. John Kerry received 23% of the white vote. Barack Obama got 23% of the white vote. Hillary Clinton got 21% of the white vote. I got 25% of the white vote in the state of Georgia. We tripled Latino participation. We tripled Asian Pacific Islander participation. And young people between the ages of 18 and 30 had a participation rate that was 139% higher than 2014. That's what we did in this election. And those numbers matter because when people see that their voices were heard, it hurts to have it stolen. It hurts to be muted. But what hurts more is for people to ignore your pain. And so on election night, when people were telling me, not when on my team, because they knew better, but when others were suggesting that I should concede, that it was too close, it wasn't going to work, on election night at 2 a.m., I gave a speech saying that it wasn't about whether I won. It was about whether our votes were counted. People need to see that there's someone fighting for them, because it's hard to fight for yourself when no one else is out there in the ring with you. And so my responsibility at that moment was to say that we were going to keep pushing until every vote was counted. And we filed 4 federal lawsuits, got 3 full decisions on our favor, and half of the 4th one. And then on the 16th, when there were no more eligible ballots to count for a variety of reasons, I acknowledged that my opponent had the sufficient number to be the victor, but I refused to concede the election, because to concede is to say something is right and true and proper, and this was not. The way you get communities to stand up and to stay standing, to keep fighting, is to let them know that they fought for something real. And yeah, there are people who have called me a sore loser, namely Sean Hannity. And there are those who have said that I've somehow destroyed my future by refusing to do the noble American thing of conceding and moving on. But there's nothing noble about saying that cheating is okay. And there's nothing American about letting our democracy fall because we are too weak or too scared to fight for it. And so what I want people to understand, those people who turned out, who stood in those lines for 4 hours, who were told that there were only a certain number of provisional ballots and basically had to go through a lottery to find out if they got to vote, who paid a poll tax by losing a day's pay to try and cast a vote, they need to know that not only am I fighting for them, but America will be fighting for them until we win.
So I have to say, that night, my heart was full and bursting when you didn't concede. Because the order of things in American politics is you do that, white man's gentleman walk out of the door, right? But that is a distortion of what our democracy is. And you got a lot of heat for it, but you did it. You woke up every day, and we know after the fact now, threats to you, physical threats to your life, that of your family, your community, your staff, that you graciously did not talk about at that time, even though I wanted you to, but you didn't. You never brought in the fact that, your security was ridiculous. It was just, I'd never even seen it. It was equivalent to like an Obama detail when he was actually president. It was that much around her that you kept behind. So I want to talk a little bit about the decision not to lead and let people know the danger that you encountered every day that you walked out of the door. But then also, how did you walk out of the door every day? I want to know how you did it so that we can get a little bit of that that magic that pushed you forward every day when you woke up?
So the day I told my parents I was going to run for office, my mom actually asked me that question. She said, they could do something to you. You could be hurt. And what I told her that day is what I believe. My responsibility was to fight. And there's something that sounds slightly egomaniacal about that. Like, my job was to save democracy. No, that's not what I mean. You cannot believe that something needs to be real and made true and then say it's someone else's job to do it. We all have to find the ways we can insert ourselves into that space. I'm an introvert by nature. I spend a lot of time alone, and I am happy there. It gives me a lot of time to watch TV and movies. And so every day going out the door is hard for me because it's a moment where I have to talk to someone, and while I appreciate it, people touch me a lot, and it's sincere, and I accept it as such. But I'm not the most touchy-feely person. And so each day was a moment of sublimating my preferences for the vision I wanted for the world and the vision I wanted for Georgia. And the same thing was true about my safety. There were those who were around to protect me. My team kept a lot of the stuff from me. I mean, some of it would just slip out, or I'm like, I can read, although technically I'm not supposed to read any of the comments in Facebook ever again. But yeah, I mean, people were very aggressive about their hatred and their intentions towards me. There was one town we went to in Georgia where I think the entire sheriff's department lined the street to protect me. And they were very kind. But what drives you out of the door, what makes me do this every day, is I know what the consequences are. I grew up poor in Mississippi, and I wasn't even the Delta. I mean, we had the kind of working poverty where my parents went to work every day, and it still was hard, and we had to make choices, and we didn't have running water, and sometimes the lights got cut off. So it wasn't that hard Scrabble poverty, but it was hard. And I live in community with people who work for everything they get and still can't get enough. And as someone who traveled the entire length and breadth of Georgia, I know that mamas are dying in childbirth because our state is too mean to give them health care. I know that having a stroke in some parts of Georgia is a death sentence because the governors have been too mean to expand Medicaid. I don't get to be scared when I know I can do something about that. Now, I didn't get everything I needed done, and I could not block the rigged system. But now there's a conversation happening. Now people are doing more than they were doing the day before. And if anything's going to get you out of the door every day, it's knowing that progress happens. It may not be all the progress you want, and sometimes the loser is you so that other people can be the victors. But if I get to be part of any of that victory, then I've done what I'm supposed to do.
Amen to that. So I think it's really important to understand what happened so we can make sure that it doesn't happen again. So I would like you to be Professor Abrams now and break down for us. We hear gerrymandering, we hear redistricting, we hear voter disenfranchisement, really helping everyone understand how do we get to the place where you have these overwhelming numbers of voters for you. You had the most votes. And votes aren't being counted, ballots are being lost, districts are being redrawn. Can you take us through the checklist of what we should be looking for next time?
So let's think about this in two ways. So fundamental to our democracy is the right to vote. Voter suppression is any activity that intercedes or blocks that right. And you should think about it in three groups. So the first group is registration. Getting your name on the rolls, being able to be eligible to cast that vote. So what we saw happening in Florida was the restoration of felon rights. That was the work done by Desmond in Florida Amendment 4. That's one piece of it. Because the right to register to vote has always been the first line of voter suppression. The groups that have always been who were denied the right to vote. Most people don't realize that Native Americans weren't given the right to vote until the 20th century. And so it's understanding that there are impediments to registration. In some states, it's that third-party groups cannot ask you to register to vote. This matters because low-income communities and communities of color are unlikely to register absent a third party asking them to register. So when you hear that registration isn't permitted through third parties, what they're saying is we don't want those communities to ever access their franchise. So it's making sure that registration can happen. What happened in Georgia is something called the exact match system. And that is once you put your name on the paper to register to vote as an eligible citizen, Brian Kemp used a system that had been ruled unlawful because it disproportionately affects women and people of color by saying that a minor typographical error can deny you the right to vote. So think about it this way. In the state of Georgia, if your last name is Del Rios, D-E-L space Rios, R-I-O-S, that's what you write down because that's what's on your birth certificate. But if your driver's license is in Georgia, they do not permit spaces in your last name. And so the exact match system says that you write down your name and they arbitrarily match your name either against your birth certificate, which has the space, or your driver's license, which doesn't have the space. And if they pick the wrong system, you do not get registered to vote. And you don't know which system they use. And they don't tell you what the problem is. They just tell you you're not registered to vote because you do not have an exact match, and you don't know what to say to fix it because they never tell you what the problem is. And so when you think about voter suppression and registration, it is any of those tricks that are used to deny you the right to actually register. The second group is access. Folks who have gotten through the registration then find themselves being purged from the rolls. This happened in Ohio. The Supreme Court case said that, yes, you can lose your right to vote if you don't use it. Well, America does not have mandatory voting. So the fact that you can lose the right to vote by not using it seems to suggest that it is a mandatory activity to vote. But it ignores the fact that these other obstacles exist. And so what happened in Georgia was that Brian Kemp purged more than 1.5 million voters over a 10-year period, including 300,000 right before he joined the primary to run for governor. He purged voters who were not lawfully purged. He purged voters who had used their rights or who never got a notice that they were on the list of people who would be purged. So the second part of voter suppression is access. It's knocking people off the rolls because you say they aren't allowed. Or it's not sending them their ballots. Absentee ballots are something that you can do in a number of states. In a number of states, absentee ballots don't show up in the communities they're supposed to show up in. Or in Mississippi, you have to have a notary public that tells you that you can apply for it, and then you have to get someone to notarize you sending it back. You create these complicated systems. And so anything that interferes with your ability to access the right to vote is voter suppression. And then the third act of voter suppression is refusal to count the ballots. That's one of the things we saw in Florida. We see that in Florida basically every 4 years. But it's also an issue in states like Georgia where you have voting machines that are not safe and that are antiquated. But it's also absentee ballots being sent in, and depending on the county, the ballot can either be counted or not. And so in Georgia, 2 counties that sat next to each other, one was accepting absentee ballots with minor problems on it. The other one was rejecting them at the highest rate in the state of Georgia. It just so happened to be the most diverse county in the state of Georgia. So if you were Latino or Asian Pacific Islander, good luck getting your absentee ballot counted, because those are also the communities that were the newest voters in that county. And so to think about voter suppression, you have to think about it as a continuum. Each of those things may be lawful on its face. Oh, the other access issue is poll closures. If you live in a community without public transit, and your voting place used to be across the street, and now they move it 2 miles away, and there is no bus to get you there, and you don't have a car, and you have 2 hours off work to get to vote and get home, moving your polling place denies you the right to vote. Waiting in line for 4 hours when you lose your salary for those 4 hours, and you are a shift worker who makes $8 an hour, that's a day's wage. That's a poll tax. And so we have to think about voter suppression as a continuum of activities. It's not as simple as voter ID or closing a polling place or an absentee ballot. It is a system that, when connected together, disenfranchises whole communities from the right to cast their votes. And if you are not allowed to cast your ballot, you are not allowed to be a full American in the United States.
So from where we are now, and this is a day that's talking about racial healing, we know it's so important that every American be able to exercise their right to vote and have a voice. From this point, what can we, folks watching the live stream, do? I know you're all about right now building coalitions that protect against this kind of thing happening in 2 years, folks. It's coming, less than 2 years now. We're coming up on this. What are the actionable steps we can take?
Number one, so Fair Fight Action is the organization we created that looks at voter suppression. Our mission is to fix voter suppression in Georgia, and by doing so, create a roadmap for doing it across the country. So if you're interested, go to fairfightaction.com and sign up. We'll tell you about all the stuff we're doing. Because fighting voter suppression is the fundamental responsibility we all have. Every state you live in, unless you live in Oregon, Washington State, or California right now, in Colorado, they all tend to have incredibly liberal access rules. Most other states have some form of voter suppression that's typically geared towards the communities that are supposed to be the least likely to vote, and therefore they're trying to keep them from ever actually engaging. That's number one. So find the organization that's nearest to your hearts or nearest to your community and fight voter suppression. Number two is that we have to be paying attention to the census. I'm working with a group that's going to create a census organization that's going to work with other organizations across Georgia to make sure hard-to-count populations sign up. If you do not get counted in the census, you do not count for the next decade. That means resources don't come. It means you don't get represented in Congress. It means we get not only gerrymandered communities, we lose our voice. And so make sure you are participating in the census. All of you are opinion makers and influencers. Make sure communities are participating. If you're an immigrant community, a person of color, poor, or a child, those are the four populations that are least likely to be counted, and they're the ones who need the support the most. So participate in the census. And then number three, vote. By God, vote. Vote in every election, every time. We take for granted our democracy, but it is fragile. And if we did not know that before, November 2016 showed it to us, and every election since has been a reinforcement of that truth. We do not have a permanent democracy. We have a democracy we have to fight for. And that fight has to happen every day, and it happens at the ballot box. So support voter suppression, support anti-voter suppression activities, support the census, and vote, vote, vote. And that is how we fix America. And that is how we achieve racial healing. So the last thing I'll say is this. The connection to racial healing is this. When every community counts, when every community is counted, and when every voice can be lifted up, then the laws reflect the diversity of who we are. And what drew me here to LA today is that the connection between diversity and our democracy is indelible. If we do not recognize our diversity, we do not have a true democracy. And we can heal ourselves by believing that to be true and fighting every day to make it so. Ava, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Stacey Abrams. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll take it away over to Holland Taylor on the left.
So proud of you, Stacey. I'm just saying that's my Spelman sister, and I'm very proud of her. We just witnessed an incredible conversation between Ava and Stacey, and it was highly transparent. It's what we need is more conversation. Now, I'm going to ask somebody in the audience, who wants to talk? Who wants to talk? I'm going to get somebody that looks mortified. Hi. No? She literally is ignoring me. Let's go to Nina Shaw. She can talk. Nina. Oh, sir, you're an activist. Let's talk to you. Can I have a moment with you? What did you think about this conversation? How can we take something away from this?
I thought it was really important. One of the things that really stuck out to me was the importance of people who have been convicted of felonies voting.
That is your platform.
Absolutely. We're working very hard now to ensure that people who are have felonies have the right to vote. We pay taxes, so we should be able to vote. And also with the census, one of the things people don't think about is people who are in county jails throughout the country, they still have the right to be represented in their communities, and that information isn't disseminated, so we need to do a better job at ensuring that that's taken care of. So thank you for asking me a question.
You were perfect. After I got ignored twice, I appreciate you. No hate. I love you. You know what? We've been here a long time, and I'm so proud of what has transpired here today. I think that we need to make this a moment and take a little group selfie. Are you down with that? Let's do it. Okay, I'm going to take a couple this way. You guys can stand up, smile. Right there. 3, 2, hey. Okay, I'm going to get you this way. What's up, y'all? Are you guys looking this way? There you go. Is Storm waving? Hi! Well, I wasn't in it. There we go. We made history today, I think. I'm pretty sure of that. Here to introduce our final performer of the afternoon is an Emmy Award-winning actress and producer who has entertained the nation for over 4 decades. Please welcome Miss Holland Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you for that 4 decades. It's been more like 5, but thank you anyway. It's a real joy to be here. I don't think I've ever been at an event where there were such open hearts, open ears, and open minds, and it's a privilege. I thank you. But it's beyond exciting for me to introduce this next artist whose voice has been in my head for many decades also. She's both a stalwart artist, an activist, and a rock music legend who has always been on the right side of history. Using her voice to speak out for LGBT rights as well as environmental issues, she is a true conqueror who pours every ounce of her truth into her music. Performing I Need to Wake Up and Pulse, please welcome Melissa Etheridge.
Oh, thank you so much. Man, I love being with you. All are amazing. I'm glad you took a selfie because this gathering of people is just soul enriching. So I'm honored to be here. Honored to be here. And my job is to play the music because music reaches in where sometimes words get lost, you know. Sometimes people can't help but go along with you, even though you're different, even though you're way different. They still join you. And I found out that in my life. I grew up in Kansas. Yep, there's never anyone from Kansas here. Never. I don't know where they go. I think they stay in Kansas. But I grew up in Leavenworth, Kansas in the 60s and the 70s. And Kansas is the Midwest. Kansas is in the middle. Kansas is, well, as we saw this year, during the elections, Kansas will surprise you because I was raised by 2 beautiful, beautiful parents. My father was from Missouri. He was very, very poor. He was migrant farmer poor. He was super poor. And he got to go to college because he was a sports guy, right? He ended up being a basketball coach. And so I met many, many wonderful people through my father. My mother was very, very, very smart. And she worked as a civil servant for the Army. She became a GS-15, in which I said, Mom, I'm so proud of you. And she said, oh, yeah, well, I get paid half of what everyone else gets paid. So I learned a lot in Kansas. Yes, I did. My mother was from Arkansas, southern Arkansas. And there were things that she did not pass on to me willingly, I think. But the day I brought one of my best friends home, I think it was 2nd grade, her name was Vanessa. I loved her so much. We had so much fun. And she was coming over to my house because we were going to go door to door and we were going to sell these seeds that we got. And we were going to raise money for, I forget what it was, something in the school. And I said, Vanessa and I are going to go door to door. And my mother said, okay. But she pulled me aside and she said, Melissa, don't go up to the door with Vanessa. And I could not understand why. It was a mystery to me. I walked out of the house and was like, what? Why is she saying that? What is she? Oh, is it because her skin is dark? Never had I thought, never. I was not aware of this strange fear of other people's skin, right? Because in Kansas, we all lived together. We were all in the same neighborhood. It was this crazy sort of thing. And I remember junior high when Sister Allen, yes, her name was Sister Allen, came up to me And I thought, you know, she had her girls with her, and I thought, oh, this is it. It's going to be a fight or something. I don't know why. And she said, hey, you. And I said, yes. And she says, I hear you're into music. And I said, yes, I do like to sing music and play. She said, well, that David Bowie's pretty cool. You know that Fame song? And I was like, yeah, that's super cool. And music was the way, the thing that brought us all together. I found it. Because yes, I grew up in Kansas where there was one radio station during the 60s, but it played everything. There was no boundaries. I fell in love with Diana Ross's voice. It was transcendent. Ain't no mountain high enough, yeah. Oh, yeah. Michael Jackson rocked my world. I did not like Donny Osmond. That was not for me, no. Michael Jackson was it. That was the music that was reaching me as a child. This music that I did not understand at first through the 50s was called race music. I did not know that. I didn't understand that. But the minute I heard Otis Redding, I knew I had heard angels. Yeah. I knew I was understanding that soul music. I was understanding without really knowing what it was. And when I heard Elvis Presley, I was hearing the beautiful black women who used to sing down in Memphis. Yes, I was. I was hearing it through those white voices. This music that I was growing to love, this rock and roll, came from that beautiful place in the South where the skin, well, kept that music from reaching me directly. But rock and roll was born, and I was going to be part of it. Yes, I was. I was going to be part of it. And then I grew, and I came to Los Angeles. And I didn't understand these boundaries that we all had to be in. I wanted to play for everyone. I wanted to make funky music, but I was a white girl. Except the universe. The universe is funny. When I first came to Los Angeles, I looked up places we could play. I looked up places I could play. I was a girl with an acoustic guitar, and I would audition. I played everywhere in Kansas and Boston where I went to school, and I was 21 now, and I was going to take on Los Angeles. So I looked up places with music, and there was a place right on Sunset Boulevard called the Candy Store. Yes. So I went down to the Candy Store. And I auditioned. Well, I called them first, of course. And I auditioned. And there was a woman there, and her name was Lynn, and she was a beautiful black woman. And I was excited to play my music for her. There was no one in the bar at all. No one. And I played a couple songs for her, and she said, yeah, you come back. You play at the cabaret. It's this little cabaret. So I came back that weekend, and I was so excited. And I walked into the Candy Store, and no one had told me it was the black nightclub of Los Angeles at the time. And I sang, and they loved it, and I felt right, and there was no difference in my skin and their souls. It was music. And that woman became my first manager. She said, I'm going to make you the new Tina Marie. Yes. I was going to do it, you know. And then things happen. California happens, Los Angeles happens. I was a lesbian. It made it a little strange. But I kept on, keeping on. Yes, I did. And I have lived my life, and I've gone through my career. I put out an album, and I remember one of my favorite compliments was I showed up for a television show, and they were looking around, and they were saying, where is she? And I'm like, I'm right in front of you. And they said, I thought you were a black woman. I said, no, I wish, but no. I do. Yeah, but I did my thing for years and years, and I spoke up about my sexuality. I made people listen to me on my terms. I did it my way. And I had success. I did. And then I got cancer. Yeah, I got breast cancer, and I am now 15 years cancer-free. But there is nothing like There's nothing like a health crisis to really pull you out of your life, to pull you out of your world and have you look around and go, wait, there's more to this than just trying to make all the money or be number one. No, there's more to this. There's a whole life. And I looked around and I saw that the most important thing was the unity, that the oneness of it. I got the meaning of life. It's we are here. We are here to learn and grow, and there's unity in this gorgeous diversity. I was filled with it. And I said, okay, Spirit, I'm gonna believe you. I want to call on people that want to change the world. I only want to work with people that want to change the world. That's what my future is. I want to change the world. Why not? And I quickly learned that the way to change the world is to become the change you wish to see. To become the change you wish to see. So when I got a call from a guy named Al Gore. I would love to do his voice, but I just can't do that accent. But he said, Melissa, I got a slideshow I want you to put some music to. And I was like, what? This slideshow about global warming? Yeah. And so I took this newfound desire for unity, this newfound belief in change 15 years ago, and I put it into this song for a film, and I won an Oscar. How about that? How about that? That was very unexpected. But I put it in a song about waking up because I felt like that's what we need to do. Have I been sleeping? I've been so still, afraid of crumbling. Have I been careless? Dismissing all the distant rumbling. Take me where I am supposed to be, to comprehend the things I can't see. 'Cause I need to move, I need to wake up, I need to change, I need to shake up, I need to speak out. Something's got to break up. I've been asleep and I need to wake up now. And as a child, I danced like it was 1999. My dreams were wild. Oh, the promise of this new world would be mine. Now I am throwing off the carelessness of youth. Oh, to listen to an inconvenient truth that I need to move, I need to wake up, I need to change, I need to shake up, I need to speak out. Oh, something's got to break up. I've been asleep and I need to wake up now. Oh, I am not an island. Hey, I am not alone. I am my intentions trapped here in this flesh and bone, and I need to move. Yes, I need to wake up. I need to change. I need to shake up. I need to speak out. Oh, something's gotta break up. I've been asleep and I need to wake up now. Thank you so much. Again, what a pleasure. You all are inspiring and becoming the change. That's awesome. Awesome. So I've been out I have been a big old loud lesbian for like 25 years now. I know, it goes by fast, I'll tell you. And we never stop fighting, no we don't. And every day it's just getting a little closer, yes it is. But still we have tragedies, you know, we have triumphs. And we learn, and we learn, and we learn. And a couple of years ago, you know, 2016 was interesting. At the time, I thought, oh, this is just the worst year ever. And then 2017 happened. And then 2018, I'm like, oh, my God. But 2016, I was riding on a bus because I had just done a show in Michigan, and I was landing in New York City. And it was June 16th. And I got out of the bus and I turned on my phone and I started seeing the devastating, heartbreaking story of a nightclub in Orlando, Florida that, just unspeakable tragedy happened. A man walks in and shoots everyone, you know. I tell you, after being in the gay community, well, since I was an adult, and after being out for 25 years, you start to understand in a really tragic way how much people fear diversity. The hugeness of diversity and how it leads them to do awful things, unthinkable things that we wish did not exist. Yet so many of the horrible things that happen in our life, well, most of them, exist because of fear of diversity. And so the first thing that I thought of when I saw that a man had come in and taken the lives of 49 young lives dancing at Latin night in a disco, in a gay disco in Orlando, I thought this man is hurting on so many levels. And it's hard to have empathy for monsters. But I've been alive long enough to know that after we stand up for ourselves and we love and we speak our truth and we become powerful in the world, in our own worlds, that empathy is what ends up changing things. Because we will do it differently. We will not shoot those that are different than us. We will find a way to love and build the bridges. We will be the Stacey Abrams. We will be the Ava DuVernays. We will love. Because ultimately what we are trying to say and the message we are trying to get across is everyone are those people in the Pulse nightclub, because everyone has a pulse. Everybody's got a pain inside, imaginary wounds they fight to hide. How can I hate them when everybody's got a pulse? Yeah. I dream in a world that wants my soul, that tells me if I hate, I can control. But I don't believe it, I cannot conceive it, 'cause everybody's got a pulse. I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win, 'cause underneath the skin, everybody's got a pulse. Once again I hang my head to cry. I can't find the reason why they died. We will find the answer blowing in the wind. Everybody's got a pulse. 'Cause I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win underneath the skin, 'cause everybody's got a pulse. Oh, who you gonna hate now when there's no one left but you? Who you gonna gun down when you can't kill the truth? But it's inside of us, it's inside our blood, it's inside our pulse. So, na 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 na. I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win underneath the skin, 'cause everybody's got a pulse. Yeah.